This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It is 3 minutes after 10, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Aren't you lucky, eh? Star of The Daily Show now, of which more later. Sort of star, maybe pushing it slightly. I think I may have messed that up slightly. Not just crashing the end of that little introduction before the end of Nick's show. 20 odd years now and still an absolute amateur. But because you're all saying Liz Truss. I said, who do you think's come out with this? I mean, Mark has said Liz Truss. Alan has says, would it be Miss Truss? Truss says Mr. P. Truss. Everyone's saying Truss, which means I set it up wrong because it was supposed to be like the anti-Truss. It was supposed to be somebody that you wouldn't associate with all the sort of mad far-right loons who've been telling us for years that Europe has fallen, or that the West was under mortal threat, or that the civilization was dead in the West because of, I forget what the reasons were. But it's somebody who you might see as being the political opposite of that position, who has said in the last 24 hours, the West as we knew it is dead. So it's not a kind of Liz Truss or unhinged headline writer or honest Bob Jenrick kind of character or J.D. Vance or any of the other people, many of whom, of course, have hardly ever been to Europe or in terms of the American commentariat. But no, who do you think has said the West as we knew it is dead? Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. And it's a weird one, isn't it? Because it focuses thoughts in two ways. The first is, actually, you can crowdsource this for me. I've got to get on with the introduction, so I can't look it up. Did one of Hitler's people say something like, you've got to accuse the enemy of doing exactly what it is that you do? Is there a figure of speech in that sort of space that might be helpful to me at this point in the programme? The idea that you accuse them of doing what you do. Because I was thinking about freedom of speech on university campuses, which we've been told for years is under mortal threat. But Donald Trump is now literally attacking universities. And all of the people who were ostensibly very concerned about freedom of speech on university campuses are largely silent. All the free speech warriors of the last few years have got nothing to say about people being actually tasered at a what's the chops, the Jewish space lasers woman's public meeting. The assaults upon freedoms, innocent people being deported, and the American administration refusing to do anything to bring them back. All of these things displaying an epic demolition of freedoms, which the people who claimed that their freedoms were being demolished when they actually weren't, have got nothing to say about. I kind of can't knit it all together at the moment. I told you this yesterday when I was talking to David A. Graham, who's written a new book about Project 2025. It's almost impossible to keep up. For example, there is a new appointee. It's yet to be confirmed or ratified. There is a new appointee who has basically got a season ticket for Russia Today, who's never been off Russia Today. One of the stories that you might have missed, one of the stories that I'm not quite failing to keep up with because I've told you about it, but the $2 billion of funding that Trump is removing from Harvard for unspecified offences, or perhaps not unspecified offences, perhaps you know what they are. I don't. I can tell you that one of Trump's picks for the IRS, Billy Long, had his personal debt paid off by donors whose firms will have their own cases. They will have business before the tax agency that Trump wants him to lead. So he is effectively putting in charge of the tax agency a bloke who has had his own personal debts paid off by businesses that may be seeking special treatment or preferential treatment or favourable treatment from the tax agency. A judge has found probable cause to hold the entire Trump administration in contempt for their decision not to turn the planes around on March the 15th. And then you've got the Harvard thing. Do you want to hear all of it? And do you want to hear how bonkers things are? I'll read it until you lose the will to live, all right? So this is real from the President of the United States of America. Everyone knows that Harvard has lost its way. They hired from New York Bill D and Chicago Laurie L at ridiculously high salaries fees, two of the capital letters worst and capital letters most incompetent mayors in the history of our country to, quotes, teach, end quotes, municipal management and government. These two radical left fools left behind two cities that will take years to recover from their incompetence and evil. Harvard has been hiring almost all woke radical left idiots and bird brains who are only capable of teaching failure, capital letters, to students and so-called, quotes, future leaders. Look just to the recent past at their plagiarizing president who so greatly embarrassed Harvard before the it is just absolutely unhinged, right? It's truly unhinged. And I am struggling to keep up. I think it might have been Goebbels. Are we going with Goebbels? I've got a couple of people saying he said, accuse others of what you yourself will do. So in the arena, most obviously, of shutting down freedom of speech, the idea that J.D. Vance can accuse others of having problems with free speech while students in the United States are literally being snatched from the streets and locked up for writing editorials in student newspapers is frankly extraordinary. And I wasn't exaggerating. You probably haven't seen the footage of the fella getting tasered at a political meeting. Others arrested. I mean, incredible scenes. Some of them were simply protesting about job losses. And the list goes on. I cannot, as I keep telling you, I struggle to keep up, and I haven't found a really reliable record. Do you remember when the Washington Post kept a track on Donald Trump's lies? I think it hit 30,000 in the end. And that achieves two things. The first thing it achieves is the reassuring knowledge that the world hasn't actually gone mad and that other people are noticing the lies unfolding as well. But also, there's a point on that scale where it ceases to matter. And this was in the first term. There's a point, this was, I think, what Steve Bannon talks about when he talks about flooding the zone with excrement. Not the word he uses, but it's 10:10 on Thursday morning. There's a point when it stops mattering, isn't there? There's a point when the truth stops mattering. I'm obsessed with this. Absolutely obsessed with it, because it seems to me that throughout human history, the very worst things happen when the truth stops mattering. When the truth is balanced out by lies, when rather than it being our job, if someone says it's raining, to stick our head out of the window and see whether it gets wet, instead you have the notion of equivalence. Someone says it's raining, someone else says it isn't. So, well, it's 50-50. It's not, is it? The truth is dead. At what point on that 30,000 tally do you think it actually broke? And that is why Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has said that the West no longer exists. Incredible. Because most of the people who've been whining about the West for years because they don't like foreigners have actually ushered in precisely the thing they claimed they didn't want, the destruction of the West in its traditional forms, by which you would essentially mean an American-led coalition of liberal democracies. And we don't have that anymore. We have a coalition of liberal democracies, but it is not American-led. It's incredible. She spoke directly about Trump's inner circle, describing the EU as not having bros or oligarchs making the rules. We don't invade our neighbours and we don't punish them. A reference to the tariffs and the naked imperialism coming out of Russia, particularly with regard to Ukraine. I know it's not new to you. I know it's not new to you if you confine your news intake exclusively to this programme, let alone anywhere else. But it is extraordinary that we are living through a recalibration of the entire world order. And it's a recalibration in which there are essentially four major powers now: Russia, China, the United States of America, and Europe, the European Union. You don't need me to remind you that we are in none of those four major powers. I mean, I don't know when the day will be perfect to reflect upon the utter idiocy of cutting ourselves loose, cutting that umbilical at a... I guess it's become more ridiculous with Trump's arrival in the White House. But remember, a lot of people who cut the umbilical are very much in the same camp as Trump, both domestically and internationally. But the idea that the West is dead is a quite incredible thing to come from the lips of the President of the European Commission. I've got two questions for you if you want to get in early. Is she right? And what does she mean? I can tell you a little bit about what she means, but she isn't she? And I don't know, some things are so huge that we can't process them. I talked a lot a couple of months ago about normality bias. I was obsessed with it because it's that thing that stops you from fully acknowledging the gravity of the situation that you're in. It's a bias towards normality. Even if all the evidence tells you that you're living through profoundly abnormal days, you have an inner voice that sort of resists the notion that things can be that abnormal. We can't possibly be watching our closest ally, arguably, attack judges, attack teachers, educators, attack the media, attack domestic business in the context of tariffs, because I bet you have to presume he wants to scare them into obedience. Mike puts it well into 4 stages. It's not really happening. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is, it is happening, but it's not a big deal. Stage 3 is, it's a good thing, actually. And stage 4, people freaking out about it are the real problem. There's another stage, perhaps for some people, which is contained within today's Unhinged headline. But that notion that the West is dead is almost too big for us to contemplate. The idea that everything that has been true since arguably the post-war period, or post-Suez, or post joining the common market in the 1970s, for us, I guess for Germany and France, it would go back further to when they joined it. I say the post-war period, everything that has been true in the post-war period is no longer true. And she seeks to sell Europe as the solution. She says inequalities are less pronounced here, in part because we have a social market economy and because the levers of power are more widely distributed. We have a stronger, broader middle class than, for example, the US, something which Gary Stevenson has a lot to say about. Don't be smug and complacent about the strength or the size of the middle class in the West at the moment. A conversation, if you like, about migration, about freedom of speech, about European voters is almost unbelievably upside down. The United States of America is doing all the things that they accuse Europe of. They are literally attacking the rule of law, literally attacking academia, literally attacking the media, literally attacking the media. Not physically, but verbally, excluding them from spaces, confining scrutiny to sycophants and cronies. And you sit here trying to come up with questions. There's really only one, but normality bias makes you nervous about going there. There's something that kicks in right now, going, oh, don't be daft. You sound ridiculous. The West is dead. Come off it. Talk about parking tickets. The West is dead. The West as we know it is dead. He's only been there 3 months. 4 months, is it? January, February, March, April. Yeah, one or the other. What? You can't. But she's right, isn't she? It's incredible when you think about it. In some ways, the single most important story that we will ever discuss together. And yet already, it feels simultaneously too big to properly process and too mad to believe. But she's right. The West, quotes, no longer exists. Tell me what she means and tell me why she's right. On 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And Marita, I thank you, but I think you got this a bit wrong. You said, why is no Western leader actually saying what you're saying? Well, this is Ursula von der Leyen. Admittedly, she's not hitting the marks that I've just hit about the media, the rule of law, and educational institutions. But she is saying out loud the words, the West no longer exists. The West no longer exists. What does that mean to you? How do those words reach your ears? The West no longer exists. I almost think asking you whether or not you think she's right is the wrong way into this conversation, because she just is, isn't she? She just is. It's an upending of everything the tariffs alone would represent a complete upending of trade policy in the post-war period since the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the 1930s, which had the precise opposite effect of what was intended and made everything worse. It's quite incredible to reflect upon the fact that the words, the West no longer exists, are simultaneously stunning in their gravity and also self-evident. Who knew it could happen so quickly? Who knew it could be done so speedily and so completely? Let's get the phone lines open. It's a slightly strange one, this, but it's a very big moment when the leader of the European Commission describes the West as no longer existing. In the traditional, in the historical, in the only way that most of us have ever known. So what does it mean, and what happens now? I tell you what, answer that question, I'll give you the money myself. What happens now? Because however you cut this, the United Kingdom looks dangerously isolated, right? You do a trade deal with Donald Trump. All the talk about a trade deal with Donald Trump seems to be coming out of the White House now. I saw one sage yesterday pointing out that he probably needs a deal with China more than China needs a deal with him. He's fluffed this up so completely and so spectacularly that even if he wasn't disgusting in all the other ways, personally and politically, his presidency would have been over if they hadn't broken the truth. He is Liz Truss with a kind of bad fake tan. That is a matter of economic record now. So what does it mean that the West no longer exists? Is perhaps the question I should be asking you. Not is it true? What does it mean when she says that the West no longer exists? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for the United Kingdom? What does it mean for Europe? What does it mean for the West? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What does it mean for all of us if the West as we know it no longer exists?
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 10 is the time, and there is a slightly uplifting subtext to all of this in the context of what will the world look like next if, as Ursula von der Leyen opines this morning, the West no longer exists. The West as we know it, obviously it still exists. The West now, I suppose, is Canada and Europe, but the West as we know it, Pax Americana, America. There's a dollar now is under serious threat. What does the future look like? And the upbeat analysis of that could be, as Gordon Brown has pointed out, and as Ursula von der Leyen pointed out in this interview, global trade, 13% of global trade is with the US, which means 87% is not. And therefore, the New World Order could involve a bearding of the United States. I don't know. I want to know what you think. Niall's in Belfast. Niall, what would you like to say?
How you doing, James? Big fan.
Thank you.
I was just chatting to, I think it's your producer, and I was just saying that I think Ursula von der Leyen is maybe preparing us for a manoeuvre, I think that what might happen in the future is a deepening of an alignment with China. And I think in general that would be a better thing, to have a less, I guess, hostile relationship with China. I think that would have implications that would, potentially strengthen relations with Russia. Potentially, if we in the EU begin to open up and
we're not. I hate to break it to you, mate. We're not in the EU.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm in Ireland.
So you kind of are.
I'm in Belfast, but let's see what happens with that.
Yes.
Anyway, I think America has done its Brexit moment. It's isolated itself like the UK has done, and I think the EU will look to strengthen its relationship with China, and with China, Russia, India being part of BRICS. I think that potentially we could see a limitation in hostility with Russia eventually. And
I'd strongly disagree, or I certainly don't desire to see that. Not while Vladimir Putin is in the Kremlin. Russia is a gangster state.
Absolutely, but James, let me just say something that I think LBJ said. It's better to have your enemies inside urinating out than outside urinating in.
Yeah, but
I think
if
we can keep an eye on them. We can keep an eye on them.
Let's leave that bit out of the analysis, if we may. I don't want any form of rapprochement with. Also that there'll be people listening to this who are Ukrainian refugees. And
listen, I am 100%. I spend half my time in Lithuania.
We don't need Russia.
I know we don't need them, but we also don't need to have them on our border with such hostility. We need to try to remove and dissipate hostility.
Okay. This is why I said for a reason. Let's leave Russia out of it. What do you think she means, Ursula von der Leyen means, when she says the West no longer exists?
Well, I don't think that we are going down the line of this kind of wokeism and things like that. I mean, I think that she is manoeuvring us and preparing us for a change, a shift. Perhaps if we're not going to have such a deep alliance with Russia, with the US,
then we'll have to look elsewhere.
A deepening relationship with China.
Well, maybe not China, but other countries. Global trade, 13% of global trade is with the US, 87% is with other countries. I suspect people are going to be quite shocked by that statistic. This sense that we have no choice but to be. Donald Trump certainly seems to believe we have no choice but to be enthralled to the United States. I like this from Jimmy. Thank you, Niall. Hi, James. The West is a post-war concept. This is the point. This is what I suppose we should have started with first principles. What is the West in the context of what Ursula von der Leyen is saying? The West is a post-war concept and was based on a loose alliance of like-ish-minded, semi-liberal-ish, semi-progressive-ish, varying levels of capitalist first-world countries. Communist Russia and China represented the opposition. The US, as the biggest single economy, leading the West to imitate Russia, leaving the West, I beg your pardon, to imitate Russia means that phase is over. And Jimmy agrees with Niall. The EU could align with China. Britain may now have to align with the penguins, referring to some of the uninhabited islands that Donald Trump, in his genius, elected to put tariffs on the other day. That's two contributors, both citing China. I should warn you perhaps that there is a story in the news today about car production being halted because there are worries that some of the software in the car may be used by China for spying on the people driving the car. I think often of a text I got earlier this week which said, why are they interested? Why would China be interested in my personal information, James? Which on a very specific and personal level is quite a hard question to answer. But generally speaking, you don't want to be spied on. I like this question, but it needs unpicking further, doesn't it? Jimmy's definition of what the West is makes Ursula von der Leyen's conclusion almost irresistible. America is now imitating Russia. It has become a place of oligarchs and oppression. It has become a place of state control, of media, education, almost all the engines of democracy. What does that mean for the rest of the West? Matthew's in Southend. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Morning, thanks for having me on. I'm normally one of those people that just sort of listens quietly in the background, but I think...
That's my mission, to tempt people like you onto the programme. That's why I come to work every day. Go on, don't blow it now, Matt.
So I think that Europe and the EU more recently has been overshadowed by the USA since World War II.
Yes.
We've relied on their military dominance. We've relied on their financial dominance. It was the Marshall Plan that helped us reconstruct after the war. NATO has predominantly been the United States led, with us relying on their logistical support. Our foreign policy has often been seen as slow and cautious, mainly because obviously we need to get consensus amongst 27 member states with often quite different views.
Yes.
And the US, obviously, a bit of a stark contrast. The president is historically, supposedly a unifying figure. Yes. I don't think we can say that at the moment. And I think that this is an opportunity for Europe and the EU in particular to step up and take a leading role, to come out of the shadow of American military, and to be able to stand on our own feet and put forward our views as one voice.
Except we're not part of it anymore.
No, we're not. But generally, our international policy is fairly closely aligned. Obviously, we are quite military interlinked.
So another story to that. It's funny. I know that we're on the right path together when callers and contributors start saying things that make me remember other headlines that I've seen in the last couple of days. So I've just mentioned the one about potential Chinese espionage, but there is another one about the Brits approving, and I don't think I cut this one out of the paper, the British approving a German plan to send missiles to Ukraine. And that is another example of the old order being utterly transformed, isn't it?
I think so. But I think Europe has been possibly a bit hesitant up till now, possibly because of a legacy of colonialism. A lot of, obviously, European powers were interfering on the world stage for a long period of time and potentially didn't want to go back down that approach of imperialism. But I don't think we really have a choice. If we want to be able to stand on our own feet and secure our borders, secure our way of life, our thoughts and our feelings of what freedom and democracy should be, we can't rely on anyone
the United
but
States of America
in
the way that we used to do. And bizarrely, the Vice President of the United States of America and a lot of the people near the inner circle of Donald Trump are accusing us of all of the things that you've just described from the other end of the telescope. They're accusing us of doing all of the things that they seem to be committed to doing themselves. So you agree in the way, and you listed other things, bringing the Marshall Plan into it. In the context of the post-war period, the West is dead.
I think it's like any other evolution. Things cannot stay the same indefinitely. That's how you end up with stagnation. I think what we need to do now is take a good hard look about what we want to be, not only as a country within the UK, but also in a wider global context as part of Europe.
Well, that's
Where
the
do
problem.
we want to be?
I don't know if today's the day for that phone, and we've nibbled at the edges of that question in the past. The Labour government seems adamant about European Union, although they seem to be making noises now about possible closer alignment, certainly on one front, on veterinary and other areas. But the idea that we are now sitting on the sidelines of a reordering of the entire globe while not actually having much, we've got plenty of skin in the game. All our skin is in the game, but we've got no say. Do you remember when people told us that we had to leave the European Union because we had no say over our own future? I wonder where they are now. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. Other things. I don't know if I can do a whole show like this one day, not today. Where together we just kind of bring everything, like at school, and we all bring something in from home. We all bring in a story that we worry the other people I worry you might have missed. Did you see the story about the European Commission issuing burner phones and basic laptops to some US-bound staff to avoid the risk of espionage? This is usually something that you would do on trips to China. That's reported in the Financial Times. I wonder also whether or not, if you're going to America on business, you should get a burner phone if you've ever posted anything critical of Donald Trump, because, like all big defenders of free speech, I can't believe this. I heard someone on Nick's show when he first got in, I think he was from The Spectator, talking about how good Donald Trump would be for free speech. And here we are looking at people being ordered to praise him, or people facing expulsion from the White House if they're not sufficiently sycophantic, from the press corps, looking at universities being ordered to change their curricula to reflect more support for the regime, the administration, and yet you had right-wing journalists in this country claiming he'd be good for free speech. So I'd be careful if I was going to America of having my equipment inspected for signs of dissent. Okay, there. I'll go to Vanessa in Glasgow imminently, but just try that on for size, right? Here I am. You know me quite well by now, I hope, unless you've tuned in for the first time, in which case, hello. I think that if I were travelling to the United States of America anytime soon, I would be slightly worried that I wouldn't be allowed in. Does that sound mad? It does sound mad at this point. Okay, if they then went through my social media, if they went through my... if they found... I suppose we should play that clip, shouldn't we? So if they found this, I don't think it would merit being not let into the country. But how far from now will this not sound mad anymore? Do you see what I mean? I'm not being self-referential. It's just the most helpful lens through which to look at this particular issue. You've got the European Commission telling its staff to take burner phones and laptops. They say for reasons of espionage, for fear of espionage. But I wonder also whether being too critical of the regime, too critical of the administration is going to become a bit of a problem, is going to bar entry. Didn't Rubio say something yesterday about it's not a right to come to America, it's a privilege extended only to people who agree with us, or words to that effect. So anyway, this is a reason also to show off. So The Daily Show, which as you know is America's sort of premier political satire program did a little roundup of how the tariffs were being greeted elsewhere in the world, and one of the voices that they referred to may be a little familiar. It's a slightly strange state of affairs on almost every conceivable level, but it leads us back to this question of whether or not the West is dead. The West no longer exists. What does she mean? Vanessa is in Glasgow. Vanessa, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello.
Big fan, and I'm delighted to hear that you're on such a show. Oh, that is brilliant. So I think what she kind of means, what one of your previous callers there said was, the West as being a post-war society, post-World War II. It was kind of based on three ideas: the free markets, security, and cooperation. As we know, the free markets crashed in 2002, in 2008, in 2020. Security is no longer stable, with the US being such an unstable characteristic now.
The tariffs are a nail in the coffin of free markets, aren't they? I mean, a pretty big nail.
Absolutely.
Yes. And he's abnegated any responsibility for international security. He's made it clear he hates the idea that America has a role in that space.
Well, the whole idea of neoliberalism was new capital, new abilities for capital to travel, and tariffs are a barrier to that. Yes. So that's free markets gone, as well with the UK leaving the EU. Free markets gone. We had the security detail where the US and the EU were in cahoots, in bed together for everything. I'm thinking of the Iraq War, of course.
Yes, of course.
So security
you've done it again.
Unstable.
You've done it. Every caller is just making me remember things that I forgot. This is what I mean about not being able to keep up. Do you know who J.D. Vance blamed the Iraq War on?
I dread to think.
Have a guess.
I would imagine the UK.
Europe. He blamed the Iraq war on Europe. Germany and France particularly aggrieved, given that they were massively opposed to it, so much so that the United States renamed French fries freedom fries. But J.D. Vance gave a speech the other day in which he tried to blame Europe for the US invasion of Iraq. Anyway, carry on.
And then, of course, the third one was cooperation on all fronts. So you have a scaling back of cooperation with Brexit, with other things like the Ukraine war, with what's happening in Palestine. People are divided over social issues and over global issues. So we've never been more close in terms of social media, in terms of the ability to gain knowledge, but we've also never been further apart. And those fractures in those three areas, the free market, security and cooperation, is leading us back to a post-World War I society where every group is factioned and there are no real global powers.
Are you sure? Because I was loving your analysis until that last bit. The United States doesn't cease to be a global power. It just becomes an isolated global power.
In terms of stability in the world,
yes,
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Stability.
But I mean, the big difference would be European cooperation is Brexit notwithstanding. Von der Leyen's argument this morning is that Europe is a place of cooperation and a place of freedom and a place of...
But even that is fracturing. You can see the rise of the right from miles down the road. I mean, I know Marine Le Pen has been banned from standing in the election, but that does not stop her party.
So social market economy and liberal democracy, at least one of those two things is under fairly serious threat. We already have a populist leader in Italy.
Hanging by a thread. And so what happens is when you come to this... homogeny kind of breaking down, what happens is the scale of the economic crisis worldwide is so big that it's impossible for us as individuals to really accept or come to terms with. And so we become insular and just kind of concentrate on our own individual little section.
I guess then, under this analysis, which is brilliant, by the way, von der Leyen is being a little bit Pollyanna-ish. She's being a little bit over-optimistic when she says, in Europe, children can go to good schools, however wealthy their parents are. We have lower CO2 emissions, higher life expectancy. Controversial debates are allowed at our universities. That's quite a barb, isn't it?
It's papering over the cracks. It's trying to be optimistic, but all of that, and I think what she's trying to get at, all of that could be gone in a puff of smoke if we don't fight for it.
Blimey. I mean, I can't fault a single thing you've said, but I was allowing myself a little puff of optimism until
but
you
get. We can have optimism.
I know. But first, I have to process the bleakness. I have to process the bleakness of your analysis before I can start building up my reserves of optimism. Because I thought, the New World Order, that line, that uplifting line about 87% of the world of global trade has nothing to do with the United States of America. We don't have to be in thrall to them.
And I think that is the thread. That is the thread. That's the silver lining.
To which we cling.
The world powers that's going to emerge out of this is what we make of it. And it depends on where we go as a society, where we go as a people, and what we're willing to accept.
And this is why the attention economy now becomes a cause for very serious concern, because wherever it is coming from, the effort put into persuading people to believe things that are not true, to vote in ways that are damaging to their own interests, to buy into bigotries and various xenophobic prejudices, the effort is epic. And you're right, we are under threat in ways that we've probably never been under threat before. Maybe that is the speech Ursula von der Leyen should have given, or indeed should give next. Great caller, great accent, could listen to her all day, says Brian. Fantastic caller, says Claire. This caller is one of the best you've ever had, and that is a high bar, says John. There you go, Vanessa. You can take that away for the weekend.
In tears, because I've listened to you for years.
Don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. It's coming up to 11:15, and I mentioned the weekend because, of course, many people break up today for the Easter long weekend, but many people don't, and those people, including the fella who gives me my coffee every morning, have my full support and sympathy. It's just coming, as I mentioned, it's 11:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:47. Quite a few of you, unprompted, telling me about changing plans with regard to visiting the United States. Andrew tells me that he and everyone he knows has cancelled plans to visit the States and will never do so while this regime is in place. And I can tell you that the US economy, according to some analysis, is set to lose billions as foreign tourists stay away. I think figures in March were down, let me get the figures correct for you, we're down 10% from a year earlier. That's according to the International Trade Administration. That's non-citizens arriving in the US by plane, down about 10%. Goldman Sachs, in addition, estimates in a worst case scenario, reduced travel and trade boycotts could cost about 0.3% of GDP, which would amount to almost $90 billion. This is a form of recession watch. And talking about cancelling things, they quote several people, particularly Canadians, saying that they're not just staying home, they're going to spend the same money somewhere else. So another opportunity, perhaps another opportunity for Europe. The head of the European Commission, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has described the West as no longer existing. Vanessa's analysis of the threat that we face was pretty stark, but not without optimism, the idea that we need to fight back against the forces that have essentially broken the West, and they are on the march in Europe as well. But I like the list of things that von der Leyen points to contrast Europe with Donald Trump's United States. Lower levels of inequality, higher levels of life expectancy. In Europe, she says, children can go to good schools however wealthy their parents are. Lower CO2 emissions. Controversial debates are allowed at our universities. She points out Russia and other autocratic states interfering in European society, but claims that the continent is less vulnerable because solidarity here is greater. I hope she's right. But you set this analysis against Vanessa's and you realise there is certainly room to demur. Inequalities are less pronounced here, in part because we have a social market economy and because the levers of power are more widely distributed. We have a stronger, broader middle class than, for example, the US. It's an extraordinary intervention, but I think an accurate one. Andy's in Stamford. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
We have spoken before. It was a long time ago.
Go on.
I think the issue for me, I think what Ursula von der Leyen might be hinting to is that obviously post-Second World War, we were in a West versus East sort of society. And it just seems to me these days we're in an information versus misinformation society.
That's strong.
And America seems to be siding I mean, it's just siding itself with misinformation. It's people are too easily susceptible to lies, effectively.
I wonder if
Donald
we could
Trump's
get
brazen.
I mean, beyond brazen. I don't know what the word is. Brazen doesn't even touch the sides of what he is, does he? But I wonder how many Trump voters truly believed that people were eating the cats and eating the dogs, for example. And that's just a low-level example of his relationship with truth, his non-existent relationship with truth. And we don't know how much of the country is enthralled to that complete breach of normality, that complete breach of reality. Is von der Leyen being a bit naive when she sort of represents or presents Europe as being not immune to, but distinct from what's happened in the States? I mean, there'd have been no Brexit without incredibly successful misinformation campaigns. Giorgia Meloni is in the White House this week. Von der Leyen hasn't been invited yet. She's a populist Italian leader with quite a lot of hard-right nationalists in her government. Do you think von der Leyen is being a little bit rose-tinted if she sees Europe as not being victim of the misinformation you describe?
No, I think that's totally fair. I mean, you've only got to see. We had a conversation, me and you, a few years back about Brexit. I voted leave, and then I rang you to express, obviously, my regret. You had a call in about that. Now, I was taken in by this misinformation rhetoric. And obviously, after the fact, I'm looking at things. I live my life completely differently now. I look at.
You say obviously. Yeah. Plenty of people are still where you were back in the day.
Oh, they are. And it baffles me these days. I mean, Donald Trump is openly espousing lies such as, the 350 billion or whatever it is that they've lent to Ukraine. And the figure is nowhere near that. And these figures are checkable.
Yeah, I know. And claiming that the tariffs are bringing in billions of $2 billion a day or something like that, when they haven't even brought that much in total, let alone per day.
Not at all.
It does, yeah. So, okay. So, I mean, you're right. I love that distinction between information and misinformation. And I think the crucial phenomenon here is, and it's something I'm doing some work on with regards to a possible podcast about the attention economy, the way that we are only valuable now in the context of our attention, how much attention we will give to content. It's weird, actually, because in a way, doing what I do for a living, this has always been true. But now there are so many calls upon our attention that it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, to take up Andy's point. All that matters is that you watch or vote. So your attention is the commodity, is the value. It's not even your custom in the way that it used to be, because your attention is monetized. It used to be that you would hear an advert on some content and think, oh, I might buy one of those. And that's still healthy and strong, but it now runs alongside the simple monetization of your attention. Why is TikTok constructed to keep you tuned in for as long as it possibly can? One of the people who came up with the recommended videos line on YouTube has some chilling reflections upon what that technology has turned into. It's how people disappear down rabbit holes, and they are, as Andy reminds us, rabbit holes often of complete misinformation, or lies, as we should probably get used to calling them. I don't know whether Ursula von der Leyen can get away with casting Europe as being somehow distinct from the States when it comes to that, except, I suppose, in terms of leaders. Europe is not led at the moment by liars, but Farage is doing very well in the opinion polls at the moment, and anything is possible in a world where Donald Trump can become president of the United States of America. So, albeit that we're no longer a European Union country, we'll always be a European country, we could be led by a complete liar, by a complete misinformation merchant. It's perfectly feasible, because people like Andy, before he gave his head a wobble, people like Andy could have voted for it because of the information, the misinformation, the false information they were receiving. 10:55 is the time. John's in Southwick in Sussex. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did, perfectly.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. What do you want to say?
Okay, so explored my point with your producer.
Yes.
Quite broadly, and I was going to say that this perception, or how I have perceived the West, has been, this East-West thing has been presented, is I felt that it's always been a them and us and an opposing situation, and that's probably been semi-deliberate or even accidental, and then progressed from however it settled. But it's it isn't true. There isn't an East and West thing financially and business-wise. There might be culturally, geographically. But back in 1945, when President Roosevelt met with the then King of Saudi Arabia to negotiate a huge financial industrial deal in Saudi Arabia to extract the oil, and the Americans were going to buy it, and they ploughed millions and millions into the country, and also soldiers as well at that time to protect the king. There was deals done for the certain parts of that world to inhabit Afghanistan. So all the time they were telling us it was them and it was us. The British were in Iran, they were in Saudi Arabia extracting all the oil and the minerals and the wealth.
Two things can be true at the same time. The exploitation of the territories and the terrible betrayal in some ways of the territories you describe is a matter of historical record. There's some ideological justification in the resistance of communism in some parts of the world.
That's exactly what went on. Yeah,
which they would offer up, whether it was true or not. It met some of the questions, but it doesn't change the Pax Americana. It doesn't change the fact that peace in Europe was in many ways guaranteed by America, and that those days are over. Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's true, but I don't.
So there is such a thing as the West, and you're choosing to frame it as West defined by opposition to East. Ursula von der Leyen isn't. She's defining the West as a coalition of like-minded countries, which no longer exists because the biggest one in it is no longer like-minded.
Yeah, so what she said was quite true. It no longer exists as we perceived it, is what I'll say then. And as it is existed, the whole parameters of protection, borders and motivations has changed. I think what we do need to think about is that as much as I am disgusted with what's gone on in the United States and their administration of how they've adjusted and changed, and especially Donald Trump, but we shouldn't be under any illusion that those philosophies and those abilities to creep into Europe is anything other than possible.
No, I think that's missing from this speech. I haven't seen the full text of it, but as Vanessa also reminded us, the importance of standing up to some of the forces that have broken America or betrayed traditional values in the United States of America also apply to Europe. She does reference some of it, but the point of her speech, I think, was to signal a more combative political approach to the United States, not least because she believes that Trump abandoned the tariffs partly as a consequence of European assessments, European possible retaliation. They didn't retaliate, but they said they were going to, and that I think had as much impact on the market as the announcement of the tariffs itself. Thank you for that, John. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's coming up to 10:59. Right, we did 2 hours on transgender matters yesterday, and now we dive into the other area of discourse that lends itself to particularly fractious exchanges. Except this time, I'm not expecting an apology because the world doesn't really work like that. But what I can tell you is that a significant proportion of British Jewish leaders, by which I mean people elected to the Board of Deputies, have provided an analysis of Benjamin Netanyahu's government and crucially the continuing actions of it in Gaza, which is absolutely identical to mine. It is absolutely identical to where mine has been for at least a year. So does that make them anti-Semitic?
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. It is personal, isn't it? I think that when you find yourself coming in for particularly pungent abuse because of your explanation of what is happening in the Gaza Strip and your evidence-based analysis of what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing and why, when it sees, I mean, not necessarily people you'd take very seriously in many other contexts, but some people who've come for me on this have got quite big platforms. But to be accused of anti-Semitism for describing what is happening and refusing to feel more sorrow for the death of a Palestinian baby than an Israeli baby, or more sorrow for the death of an Israeli civilian than a Palestinian civilian, should not have been a controversial position. But all discussion of these matters is vulnerable to accusations of anti-Semitism, accusations of bias or of hating Israel. I don't know if I'll get sent any today, because in many ways for them now the gig is up, the game is up. The lie is unsustainable to claim that criticising Benjamin Netanyahu means you hate Israel or hate Jewish people. And I'll tell you why shortly. But if I do get any of those messages, I will, as ever, give you a little flavour of what they're like. But it is personal. So indulge me, if you would, for a moment. I was sitting there thinking, would it be right to approach this from a personal angle? But you know me. And you know how hard I find these conversations. You know that I take most criticism is water off a duck's back for me, but on this issue, the ability to want Israel to exist in its current form and to believe that it's a matter of almost unique historical importance, that will upset some people, and also to believe that what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing is disgusting and certainly deserving of the description of ethnic cleansing. And as Kenneth Roth, the son of a Holocaust survivor, explained to me earlier this week, he believes it to be worthy of a description of genocide. I may play you that clip, actually. It's not this week's Full Disclosure. That's Asher Taller, the genius comedy producer, but it's in the can. It's in the box, the conversation with Kenneth Roth, where he explained to me why he, as a Holocaust survivor's son, is happy to use, as a Jewish, obviously, Holocaust survivor's son, is happy to use that word, the G word, as it were, in the context of Israel. And it is personal, because it is an attempt to shut down discourse. It is an attempt to allow terrible things to continue by attacking everybody who condemns those terrible things. It doesn't matter that you also, obviously, and in the strongest of terms, condemned what Hamas did on October the 7th. But the attempts to shut down and silence people whose consciences would not allow them to look the other way, who were certainly not going to dedicate hours of their radio programme to the family tree of a teenager who presented a documentary for the BBC while barely mentioning the death toll in the Gaza Strip or the massive uptick in settlements being undertaken by the most extremist Israeli government we've ever seen. Those of us who refuse to toe that line or refuse to go down that road have been exposed to truly hideous abuse, absolutely hideous abuse, and we will continue to be. And we are not people who wrote forewords for books that were profoundly anti-Semitic without mentioning the anti-Semitism, or offered our support to muralists who had artwork that was profoundly anti-Semitic removed from Facebook. There are no parallels here between honest critics of Israel and the last Labour leader. So save yourself tenpence the way that you're... save yourself tenpence if you're thinking about sending that point of view in, because I have almost verbatim quoted a letter sent by 36 members of the British Board of Jewish Deputies to the Financial Times. We write, as representatives of the British Jewish community, out of love for Israel and deep concern for its future. This is one of the most honest interventions in public discourse that I think I've ever seen. And yes, it could be susceptible to better late than never, I suppose. But it is, I mean, it is a moment. Listen to this line here. The inclination to avert our eyes is strong, as what is happening is unbearable. But our Jewish values compel us to stand up and to speak out. This is what we see. The last 18 months of heartbreaking war have shown us that the most successful way of bringing the hostages home and creating a lasting peace is through diplomacy. By the end of the first phase of the second ceasefire and hostage release deal, 135 hostages had been released through negotiation, just 8 by military action, with at least 3 tragically killed by the Israel Defense Forces. America, Qatar and Egypt again stood as guarantors of the release of all remaining hostages in the second phase phase of this deal in return for Israel withdrawing from the Gaza Strip. I wonder how many people here, relying on British media, are actually aware of this detail. In return for Israel withdrawing from the Gaza Strip, a strong plan for the reconstruction of Gaza was approved and supported by the international community to be managed by a Palestinian leadership, which would be a viable alternative to Hamas, financed by the Arab League. And here's the clincher. At that moment, the Israeli government instead chose to break the ceasefire and return to war in Gaza with the Itamar offensive, so called as it was Itamar Ben-Gvir's condition for returning to the coalition, thus enabling the Israeli government's budget to be passed within the tight deadline needed to avoid an election. And of course, what they don't add is that an election would quite possibly see Benjamin Netanyahu compelled to face the corruption charges that he has been running away from for years. The letter goes on. Since then, no hostages have returned. Hundreds and hundreds more Palestinians have been killed. Food, fuel and medical supplies have once again been blocked from entering Gaza, and we are back in a brutal war where the killing of 15 paramedics and their burial in a mass grave is again possible, and this line, and risks being normal. Such incidents are too painful and shocking to take in, but we know in our hearts we cannot turn a blind eye or remain silent at this renewed loss of life and livelihoods, with hopes dwindling for a peaceful reconciliation and the return of the hostages. The most extremist of Israeli governments is openly encouraging violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, strangling the Palestinian economy, and building more new settlements than ever. This extremism also targets Israeli democracy, with the independence of the judicial system again under fierce attack. The police increasingly resembling a militia, and repressive laws are being advanced as provocative partisan populism is bitterly dividing Israeli society. And here is a line that I'm quite emotional to read, given my attempts to make this point to you over the course of the last 18 months or so. Israel's soul is being ripped out, and we, members of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, fear for the future of the Israel we love and have such close ties to. How could that position ever have been controversial? How could it ever have invited accusations of anti-Semitism? Israel's soul is being ripped out, and we, members of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, fear for the future of the Israel we love and have such close ties to. Silence is seen as support for policies and actions that run contrary to our Jewish values. Led by the families of the hostages, hundreds of thousands of Israelis are demonstrating on the streets against the return to war by an Israeli government that has not prioritized the return of the hostages. We stand with them. We stand against the war. We acknowledge and mourn the loss of Palestinian life. We yearn for the day after this conflict, when reconciliation can start. As we mark the Festival of Freedom, with so many hostages still in captivity, it is our duty as Jews to speak out. That is 36 elected members of the largest representative body, Jewish representative body in the country, warning that Israel's soul is being ripped out by Benjamin Netanyahu's government. 12 minutes past 11 is the time. I want to know how hard it is to be like them. Because I'm not like them. I am not Jewish. I do not have family connections with Israel. I arrived at the conclusion they've arrived at before Netanyahu abandoned that ceasefire attempt. But today is not a day for discussing whether or not this deserves to be filed under better late than never. Today is a day, I hope, because it hasn't necessarily worked in the past, but today is a day, I hope, upon which we can hear voices similar to the voices of Harriet Goldenberg, Baron Frankel, Sophie Hassanson, Robert Stone, Deborah Barnett, Lottie Blankston, Eddie Corsten, Naomi Sorgor, Annabelle Dachis, Lee Dworkin, and many others. Because it must have been a pretty lonely place that you found yourself in. We took a call from a lovely rabbi not long ago, so we knew this opinion existed. But to be passionately committed to Israel and yet disgusted by the current Israeli government, and to know that your supporters in the broader population were being accused of hating you. I was being accused of hating you because you're Jewish, even as we agreed, almost word for word, on the absolutely essential distinction between Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu's administration, Benjamin Netanyahu's regime. It's an incredible letter for that. Lauren suggests that historians will cite this text for years to come, and adds a little bit more controversially that we allowed ourselves, our government, and the Fourth Estate to get cooked by state propaganda and status quo. That's why it was considered controversial. I want to know what it's been like, what it is like now to be probably Jewish, yes, I think to be Jewish, to be committed to Israel, and to believe, as these members of the British Board of Deputies believe, that Benjamin Netanyahu and his colleagues are ripping the soul out of Israel. How hard is it in your family, in your community, in your congregations? How hard is it to be, if you like, pro-Israel and anti-Netanyahu? I'm fairly confident you're not going to be able to accuse these people of anti-Semitism. I know that accusing Jewish critics of Israel sometimes involves accusing them of being self-hating Jews. That's a phrase I've been introduced to by you over the years, but I can't quite see that's going to work here. 36 elected members of the Board of Deputies of British Jews describing Benjamin Netanyahu's government as ripping out Israel's soul. So that's the first one. The first question is what is it like to be in this percentage? It's not by any means a huge percentage of the Board of Deputies itself. I think there are over 300 members in total. But pioneers break ground; they have to go first. I suspect, particularly since the abandonment of that ceasefire, I suspect that this is a position many more people support than are currently prepared to say so for the reasons that we've discussed. So if you are Jewish and you are supportive of Israel and you are disgusted by what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, like my guest this week, Kenneth Roth, who you can hear from shortly, just tell me what this means to you. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Just tell me what this means to you, this moment. And for the rest of us who have attempted to walk this tightrope between acknowledging the necessity of Israel's existence and the peril that it finds itself in geopolitically and historically, should not allow that to be blurred to a degree where you're not condemning Netanyahu's regime for what it's done in Gaza and what it continues to do in Gaza, up to and including the abandonment, of course, of the ceasefire. So there it is, a meaningful proportion of the Board of Deputies of British Jews are not just criticising the war in Gaza, they are accusing Benjamin Netanyahu of ripping Israel's soul out. And they are absolutely right. What does it mean to you to hear them say it? 0345 6060 973. And I'll tell you this story, it's got some coverage today. Not anywhere near as much as other stories coming out of this conflict have received. Most notably, I suppose, the fact that a teenage presenter of a BBC documentary turned out to be the son of a civil servant and therefore a Hamas member in the Palestinian government, in the Gazan government. But it strikes me as one of the most significant moments in this entire horrible, horrible saga, because it represents and it recognizes that you can, as these people clearly do, love Israel and hate what it's doing. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where a story that is unlikely to get anything like the coverage that other elements of this horrible saga has have received strikes me as one of the most important of the last 18 months. Dozens of Jewish leaders in Britain have broken their silence to condemn the Israeli government's renewed offensive in Gaza. What is that silence like? What is it like to be part of this constituency of people? And for the rest of us who are not Jewish, but who have recognized from the very start that allowing Israeli propaganda to conflate criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu with anti-Semitism was a disgusting and dangerous road to go down. How important is this moment? Gideon is in Reading. Gideon, what would you like to say?
Good noon, James. First time caller,
okay.
Long time listener.
Thank you.
So being Jewish Israeli, living in the UK for the last 12 years now, I just want to point out that the voice exists, right? I mean, it's not just coming out of nowhere.
Of course.
If you look at all the recent polls in Israel, the majority of the public is actually voting again and again and again to end the war and release all the hostages. However, the regime, the government, kind of links to what the previous hours the conversation was all about, is all about spreading misinformation, lies, populist views, and it pretty much shuts down, even internally in Israel, the criticism.
How widely understood is it, do you think, back in Israel, the pivotal point in this letter about the Israeli government choosing unilaterally to break that ceasefire agreement and return to war in Gaza? Because even in this country, I think yesterday I saw a headline about Hamas being accused of rejecting a ceasefire offer from Israel, but that original point, the original collapse in what had been negotiated and guaranteed by America, Qatar and Egypt, was a self-serving political decision by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yep.
Does the average Israeli citizen know that?
That's a very good question. So first of all, the reaction to the letter, I don't know yet. I just heard about it today from you.
Yes, of course.
But internally, it's incredibly challenging. So I'm being on the left side of the political map and has been for the last 40 years. I'm being called anything from a traitor to auto self-hating Jew, auto anti-Semite, you name it.
Yes.
Just for bringing up or trying to float facts. But again, it links so tightly to misinformation in the media.
Right.
When you keep promoting that Hamas broke all the deals again and again and again, it's incredibly hard even to try and convince people that actually there was an agreement. And then you get all the speculations. Yeah, well, there was an agreement, but they never meant to honor it.
Right. Yes.
and then how can you even counter that? I mean, it's by now we're going into imagination and, well, what if?
Well, you're painting a very compelling picture of Netanyahu's position in a sort of a pantheon of world leaders that includes Donald Trump and Viktor Orban and arguably even Vladimir Putin.
Absolutely. And this is actually I was so close to call last hour as well. But this is I fear that I'm much more pessimistic than pretty much all of your previous callers.
Yes.
To me, this is the breakdown of global treaties, global unity, and this is almost a pendulum effect that started after World War II with the creation of the United Nations and global treaties. And now we see a hard move back to the right, to nationalism. Countries stand on their own, isolated from the world, and Netanyahu is a prime example of that.
And as you speak, a caption appears on the television screen to my right, which is carrying the BBC News channel, and the caption is "Israeli troops to remain," in quotes, in Gaza after war. So that's occupation, isn't it? Really, by any other name?
Well, yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly sad, but the reality is, the minute the war is over, the minute they sign a treaty, any kind of a treaty, the minute the soldiers are out of Gaza, probably the government will fall apart. There will be elections. Netanyahu will be back on his trial.
And he knows that.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
Why do you think voices like yours and voices like these 36 members of the Board of Deputies are, if not absent, then certainly underrepresented in the conversations that we have about this issue in this country?
Well, that's a good question. I fear that, populist views are very compelling. They are very easy to put out.
Yes.
It's much harder to try and be as objective as possible, I guess, or look at the bigger picture and go into deeper explanations and deeper discussions.
That's a brilliant answer.
Social media reduced that to a one sentence answer. You can't give the full perspective in a single sentence.
And of course, people who are shouting return the hostages and it will all be over are not only factually incorrect, but they're also, of course, ignoring the facts as they are available. But as Gideon says, it becomes a sentence. How often have we pointed out that these slogans sometimes, these single sentences, spare people the difficult business of actually thinking and understanding issues, and instead allow them to contribute to public discourse from a sort of position of almost intellectual hooliganism? Gideon, thank you. And thank you also for spotting the themes. That's normally my speciality, but spotting the themes between this hour and the last hour and the way in which we are essentially witnessing the end of the West as we know it. And that arguably leaves Israel it's always in a unique position, but in a particularly perilous position, something that these letter writers recognise when they describe Netanyahu as tearing the soul out of Israel. If you rip the soul out of somewhere, what are you left with? Kate's in Barnet. Kate, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Kate.
I just felt compelled to ring in because I felt like you were speaking to me. I'm Jewish. I'm always been very, very proud of my Jewish roots.
Yes.
My kids always take the mickey out of me and say it's the first thing I tell everyone. Even though I'm not religiously Jewish, but I'm very culturally Jewish.
Yes.
And I felt very alone throughout all of this, whether it is in sort of listening to certain friends or acquaintances talk about their views. I feel on social media, as in sort of Facebook, friends or people that you don't necessarily see in your life, but who are sort of demonstrating very strong views that I don't agree with. I felt like this before October the 7th, actually, that if I dared to sort of put what I would consider to be a more balanced view, I would get shot down. I felt such animosity towards me. That phrase, self-loathing Jew, has been used against me because I think one life is as important as another. And when people scream, "What about the hostages?" which seems to be the most prevalent cry coming from that side, it astounds me how blind, you've often said on your programme, how many is too many? How many is too many? And how is it that Israel can behave in the same way again and again and use a sledgehammer to crack a walnut and think that the outcome is going to be different when all that has happened in the last 18 months is that more terrorists, more anti-Semitism has been created by the way that Israel has behaved. And it astounds me. It's like the axe voting for the tree. No, the other way around. The tree voting for the axe.
Well, I sense that's been a long time coming. That that conversation. You've been bottling stuff up for a long time.
Yes, there are my kids who are grown-ups.
Yes.
Are I have great conversations with them, with my husband, and with other good, close friends. And some who are kind of on the other side, we're allowed to have,
but capable of listening and hearing and responding. There are a lot of people like you and like Gideon. I can tell you now, I could easily do more than an hour just here. I don't know how much more, days. I don't know, but I think for me, what it boils down to sometimes is your recognition that there are some things Israel shouldn't do. And the other side of the argument, and I only discovered this, I think, since October the 7th, was the size of the constituency of supporters of Israel who didn't think anything was off the table, who didn't think anything was unacceptable, that everything was justified by the threat and by the atrocities, particularly the October the 7th atrocity, that nothing was inconceivable, nothing was unjustifiable. And that is obviously wrong, isn't it? I mean, no population, no civilization should have carte blanche to do anything to other human beings.
No, and it's that first sentence in that letter that you read out.
Yes,
it's very, it's hard to not avert. We want to avert our eyes, and I feel that's been the prevalent thing, is that people aren't looking. And actually, I spoke with somebody who lives in Israel a few months ago, and I don't know if it's the same now, they don't see what's going on in Gaza. They're not. And I also spoke to a friend who's very sort of blindly, in my opinion, pro-Israel. And when the situation with the paramedics happened, and there's a lot of rhetoric about, don't believe everything you see, and mainstream media is, Now the thing is, the BBC, for example, have been accused on both sides of being biased.
Of course.
Or doesn't that just prove that they're neutral?
Usually it would. It's not a foolproof algorithm. But yeah, I mean, I would defend their coverage in almost all circumstances, but not all. And criticisms from both sides do rather suggest that they're getting something right. But even saying that out loud, Kate, can invite a bit of a kicking on social media, or even perhaps on normal legacy, grown-up media, whatever you want to call it. Thank you, Kate. I'll just read the first two lines again in case you're just joining us. We write as representatives of the British Jewish community out of love for Israel and deep concern for its future. The inclination to avert our eyes is strong, as what is happening is unbearable. But our Jewish values compel us to stand up and to speak out. It's 11:32. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:35 is the time. A couple of other contributions from outside now, and then Tony and Michael are waiting on the phones. Kate made some brilliant points there. And just to speak of her final point about the BBC, Michelle Hussein has given an interview to British Vogue. Michelle, the former presenter of the Today programme on Radio 4, who, for what it's worth, is, in my opinion, the finest broadcaster of our generation. We're very, very similar age. I think she's the best in the business. I think she's the best we had. I think it was absolutely criminal of the BBC to let her go. I could say the same as well about our former colleague Eddie Mair, but of course both of them others were preferred for particularly the Sunday morning politics slot, which Michelle reveals in this interview that she had actually thrown her hat into the ring for. She addresses the question that Kate raised from an angle that you don't often see in the British media. She speaks of the abuse, the racist abuse that she received and the febrile environment created by the conflict between Israel and Hamas, but she's no longer bound, of course, by BBC impartiality rules, which means she can do something as simple and straightforward as calling on media companies to protest against Israel over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Kenneth Roth, the son of a Holocaust survivor and 30-year head of Human Rights Watch, goes a little further in a clip I'll play you shortly. But first, what Michelle said. There is a humanitarian crisis that is ongoing, which covers thousands of children, women and civilian men who have not only been killed but maimed and bereaved in ways that you and I, anyone living a life in comfortable circumstances, can't even imagine. This is a media strategy that has meant that the life of the Palestinian civilian is in no way covered in the same way as an Israeli civilian, and both deserve to have their stories told. Again, a point I have tried on this programme repeatedly and sometimes quite passionately to make, and it has on occasion sounded like I was barking into the vacuum. But there it is, the finest broadcaster of our generation making exactly the same point. I will not feel more or feel differently about a dead Palestinian baby than I will about a dead Israeli baby, despite what Michelle described as a media strategy designed to ensure that a Palestinian life is in no way covered in the same way as an Israeli life. And now to Kenneth Roth, the leader of Human Rights Watch, and crucially, because he says things that I wouldn't be comfortable saying, he is the Jewish son of a Holocaust survivor, speaking to me earlier this week. Why is Trump so keen to court Netanyahu, even as the atrocities in Gaza escalate to a space that nobody really foresaw after the October the 7th terror attack?
Look, at the U.S. government as a whole has an enormous Israel exception to its human rights policy. And even Biden, who said the right things, he said, stop starving civilians, stop bombing civilians, still basically continued the arms sales and military aid with a sole exception. He suspended delivery of the huge 2,000-pound bombs that were being used to decimate Palestinian neighborhoods in Gaza. Trump, is much worse. And he has started off not only by giving Netanyahu a green light, but actually by endorsing the dream of the Israeli far right, which is to, solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem by getting rid of the Palestinians, have a Riviera in Gaza and no Palestinians.
Which is why you've used the word genocidal twice during this conversation.
Well, I do think it is genocide in the sense, not just what they would be aspired to. It's not the displacement per se that's genocide. It's the killing and the creation of conditions that are unconducive to life, the starvation strategy. Those are the acts of genocide. And the intent behind it, I think, clearly is to kill and force to suffer sufficient numbers of Palestinians so they do flee. I think that's what's going on here. So I think genocide is a fair characterization, even though, the final determination by the International Court of Justice has not been made. We shouldn't get too caught up on genocide, though, because these are clearly war crimes. Yes. And war crimes are horrible. You can't indiscriminately bomb territory. You can't fire at a military target if you know the civilian consequences will be disproportionate. You can't starve civilians. You can't deprive civilians. Netanyahu and the Israeli government are doing all of these things.
Kenneth Roth there, 30 years as Executive Director of Human Rights Watch, and I think importantly, the son of a Jew who fled Nazi Germany just before the war began, and his new book, Righting Wrongs, 3 Decades on the Front Lines Battling Abusive Governments, is another one of those books that is simultaneously essential reading and almost certain not to be read by the people who would benefit most from reading it. And you can hear that interview in full on next week's Full Disclosure. But back to the question of why these voices are so rarely heard. And it is 36 out of over 300 members of the British Board of Deputies, and some people will be no doubt already claiming that means it can be safely ignored or that it's negligible. But imagine the courage you would need in that position to stand up and buck the trend, swim against this tide. And that's why I'm fairly confident that they're representative of a much bigger constituency that we are talking to and talking of today. Tony's in Bushy. Tony, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Well, I am a British Israeli. I'm 47. I spent 13 years in Israel. I came back in 2022, partly because of my dissatisfaction with the way that the Israeli government was going there, what it's like to be a secular Jew in Israel today, which is meant to be a home for all Jews. I could ramble on. I guess I'll let you ask questions. I would just like to say that this voice that you're talking about, it's definitely there. It's there in Israel. It's there in the Jewish diaspora. It's there in the Israeli diaspora, which I am very connected to. I've got Israeli friends from London to Los Angeles. There are a lot of Israelis and people generally who are super depressed, super upset about everything that is happening. But that
what is it like? Kate talked of fractiousness with family, with friends. Does it put you in a difficult position emotionally, socially?
Potentially can. Yes, it potentially can. I don't want to paint myself as the victim because I'm clearly not. But it is hard. I think part of it, I grew up in a very Zionist house, and I still, do. Back when Zionist wasn't like a sort of dirty word, and it's a real shame that has happened. My dad, who was the most chilled guy ever, was the chairman of the UK Zionist Federation, etc., affiliated to the Board of Deputies, who you spoke of earlier. Yes. And, I would say that what is happening is that we always understand and understood that any criticism of Israel will be magnified, potentially, because there is there is a group out there who would like Israel to be wiped off the map, blah,
Absolutely.
blah, blah.
Yes.
And it is kind of seen as, well, if you say anything at all, then you're giving them ammunition. Not that we need to right now.
No. I mean, it is absolutely essential to remember that anti-Semitism is real and hideous, and in some ways, well, in many ways explains the necessity of Israel's existence. Just for people listening, Tony, with your help, particularly with the background you've just provided about your dad, that word Zionist. So the context your dad would have used it would simply have meant someone passionately committed to the necessity of the modern state of Israel existing. What does it mean now? When do you say? Because some people will disagree that it's become a dirty word, but it doesn't mean that anymore in most mouths.
Well, to me, it means the same. It means a home for the Jewish people, freedom of worship, etc., etc. I think it's become, associated with some kind of Zio-fascism kind of thing, which is unfortunate because I'm not sure how we can kind of reclaim the word, which would be nice, while the current regime is in place.
And I think to echo what Kate and I were talking about, that Zio-fascism, I think you might have just invented. You didn't just invent that, did you? That's
well, it's been in my head for a few years now.
But that is that mindset we described as not believing there's anything that Israel can't do, that absolutely everything they do is justified. That perhaps is what Zionism means in many mouths today.
Yeah, and that again is ammunition for people who were Israel's enemies way before this latest thing happened and whatever. What I will say is that there are a lot of people who think like me on the ground in Israel and outside, but we're kind of squashed. Because on one hand, we're squashed between the natural kind of enemies of Israel who would like to see it wiped out, so can't say anything. Yes. And we're squashed between our own friends and family and whatever, call them typical Daily Mail readers, whatever, who are like, well, we're right, they're wrong. And actually, I think one of my friends might be listening now. His uncle once said something super profound, which is, it's not a football match. You don't have to pick a side. And I don't understand why it feels like it is so tribal, because it's 2025. We're meant to be enlightened. Yeah. It's very sad, James.
Well, and your contribution is very important. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. I really do. And I, as if to prove his point, here's another message from Shahaf this time. Welcome to my world, James. As an Israeli Brit who's opposed Netanyahu and the messianic fascists enabling him for over 30 years, I've been called anti-Semitic, a self-hating Jew, a traitor, simply for saying what the late Professor Yeshayahu Leibovitz warned, that the occupation would eventually turn the same oppressive tools used against Palestinians inward and be used against Israelis themselves. It is already happening. If you look at Hebrew social media, reservists calling for an end to the war are being dismissed. Retired senior officers saying this is no longer a defensive war are being branded traitors. Opposition politicians are being labelled a fifth column. Even the head of Shin Bet has been sidelined, while Netanyahu and his closest aides are under suspicion of corruption, including a state, Qatar, still considered an enemy by Israel. I love Israel. It will always be the country I was born in, but nowadays it's impossible to ignore the dangerous path it is taking, which means that the, what's the word I want, the client journalists in the media have, once again, as client journalists always do, achieved the opposite of what they set out to achieve. They have helped create an environment in which Israel can start tearing its own soul out, to use the words of the letter that we're discussing this hour. It's 11:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Is your hour at 12? Crikey. After the last few days of news, the heaviest of subjects, 2 hours on transgender legislation yesterday on that court ruling, and still no real answer to the question of where it's going to lead or how these the necessary new rules are actually going to be imposed. I had a little quiz for you actually, but I've probably lost it. And I tried to express this yesterday. Sorry, you can hear all my newspapers banging around, can't you? Because I'm trying to find something that I chopped out of one of them this morning, but I think I've lost it. If you with regard to those gender certificates, how many do you think were issued in 2021, 2022? How many do you think were issued in 2021, 2022? How many do you think were issued in the last year? The last year where figures are available. If you were looking at the coverage, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation. If you were looking at the coverage, cold, like from a position of complete objectivity, how many people is this story about? I think you could be forgiven for thinking the figure was in the low six figure, probably about 100,000 people are applying for a gender recognition certificate successfully every year. Go back to 2021, 2022, probably a good 60, 70,000. It must be. And the real figure is 1,000. 1,000 in the last year, 400 just 4 years ago, and yet there we are. I just found that what's the word I want? Notable. So after 2 hours of that, and now an hour on this today, although this hasn't been as heavy going as this conversation sometimes can be, Isreal will be particularly welcome when we get around to 12 noon in a few minutes' time. Jeffrey is in Barnet, which means I can claim my £5. You are the rabbi that I was referring to earlier, Jeffrey.
Yep, I am. And I have no idea whether I'm glad to be speaking to you again or not, especially after hearing all the really excellent contributions that you've had up until now.
Yes.
The reason I phoned is actually that linkage between what you were talking about on the first hour and what you're talking about now.
Yes.
But you've gone right back to the gender politics one. I don't, at this moment, remember what the first hour was about.
No, it was the Donald Trump stuff, and it was the end of the West as we know it, and all the old alliances and all the old priorities being exploded. Yep. Incredible, really. So, how significant do you think this letter is, Jeffrey?
Sorry, that's a timer going off on my phone that the soup is ready. I hope I can stop it. But I might stop you.
I'll wait. Okay. It's all right. I'm not busy. I'll wait.
I switched the soup off. I'm not sure if I switched the timer off.
What soup are you having?
I'm making the stock. We're in the middle of a Jewish festival, so it's all got to be a bit specially done. Fantastic. You can't use any wheat. Anyway, it's the Festival of Freedom, which is referred to in the letter that you were talking about.
Yes.
And there are a couple of significant things about that letter. First of all, it's helped me enormously. I feel that the Board of Deputies is so much the Jewish establishment with all the problems that establishments have, that for it to have come out from those deputies, 3 of whom are members, I'm pleased to say, of my synagogue, but it really is significant, and it will make the sorts of conversations that you've been trying to have much more evident and acceptable. I'm sure of that. And that's very important for the younger generation. 2 of the people who phoned from my community are in their 20s or maybe 30s, 20s and 30s. So that's excellent. There are 36 who signed the letter, I think.
That's correct.
I think you mentioned that. 36 just people can change the world. So 36 just Jews can change the Jewish community. Hopefully, that number is multiplied in many ways in Israel, where the changes really, of course, are so necessary. One of the negatives, I think, from Israel has been that they have so much supported and fostered the definition of anti-Semitism, so that anti-Semitism is now essentially connected with or almost criticism of Israel. It makes it very difficult, as you've found, to be critical of Israel without having these terrible slurs with the international definition of anti-Semitism, which is universities are encouraged to accept it. Donald Trump says, if you don't accept it, I'm going to take away your funding, and so on.
And it's why your words of support last time we spoke meant so much to me, actually, Jeffrey. I don't remember whether I told you that at the time, but thank you. And thank you for your contribution today. Let me keep you from your stock no longer.
May I add one more thing, which was the real reason I phoned.
Oh.
I'm sure you know Timothy Snyder.
Yes, I do.
Can you say very briefly, he's a great supporter of Ukraine, incredibly knowledgeable and very, very courageous in his criticisms of Trump. And he's just published a video called The New Paganism, a framework for understanding our politics. And what he's saying in that is that we've gone back to the world where we're no longer in control. Because of hydrocarbons and what we're doing to the climate, we no longer control what goes on. And we've become like the original Scandinavian pagans who he's researching. We recognize that we are in a position of trying to live through myths and
how fascinating! I've just found that
oracles, sacrifices, charisma, values. He picks each of those 5 up and explores how they've changed and what's going on now. For example, we look at the world no longer by being in nature, but in every way through screens. The screens which he mentions as well are automobiles. Most of the time, we're looking at screens one way or another.
He's not wrong. I shall put that in the... I see that you shared that with me from the New York Public Library's YouTube account on Blue Sky, Jeffrey, so I shall share it from my Blue Sky account now as we speak, so that other people can enjoy it as well. I think I'll play... it's too late now, is it? I was going to say I'll play the clip, for full disclosure, clip in the next hour. I'll play it during Mystery Hour because I wanted to squeeze in 1 or 2 more calls, but I don't think we're going to be able to, are we? So we'll play it now. This is Asher Talla, who is one of the most seminal and important TV producers of the last few decades, but perhaps best known for The Office, or certainly getting The Office commissioned. Well, that's what he's talking about here, and it's a fairly magical moment.
I'm quite political as well, and getting shows made is a very political process. Nowadays, I call it 3D chess, which is dealing with commissioners and the system.
Yeah,
people don't know that about it. They think
if it's brilliant, it'll get made.
Yeah, or you can just get, famous people can get themselves on telly. It's not true.
No, of course not.
There's many famous people getting their projects turned down.
Yeah.
So I was able to help pull the levers internally.
But you were still a kid.
I was still a kid. I sound horrible.
No, you really don't. We should stop saying that. You sound precocious.
I was.
But precocious is a good thing.
And I still am.
Yeah.
I still am.
A precocious 53 or 52 or 53.
What does precocious mean? Do you have to be young to be precocious?
I don't know. I think I'm quite precocious.
Well, you are. And I don't mind that in you either.
Exactly. It's a good thing to be. But you, I mean, it's always about backing it up. Okay, so all modesty aside, all self-deprecation aside, could anyone else have got The Office off the ground in the way that you did at that time in that building?
I don't think anyone as junior as me could have got The Office off the ground in that way. And I don't think when you looked at the auspices of it, it was a very slow bit of television, and it could have easily fallen down the cracks. So I'd like to say, listen, the biggest credit, let's just get this out there, is Ricky and Stephen.
Oh no, of course
they wrote it, but I think
but it could still be in a drawer somewhere.
No, it would be.
Yeah.
I'll bring the precociousness back for that. I don't think it would have been made.
No,
without
I don't
me.
either. Just made me realise that means out of the holy trinity of creatives that got The Office onto our screens, Stephen Merchant is now the only one that hasn't been on Full Disclosure, because Ricky Gervais was one of the very first guests back in the day. That's Asher Talla, a TV producer extraordinaire, now moving into the world of drama. It's a really interesting conversation about culture and television and the arts. Mystery Hour is on the way after this. I'm just making a little note, so I like to keep you up to date with what's going on in the studio. I think Rabbi Jeffrey reminds me that we should get Timothy Snyder on Full Disclosure as well. He's a fantastic commentator, a real another one who's, I'm sure to his own disappointment, being proved right about almost everything. But there it is. It is Thursday. It's almost 12 noon, which means Mystery Hour is just around the corner.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 3 minutes after 12, and you are listening to Mystery Hour with James O'Brien, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of enlightenment not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. If you're relatively new to the programme, then you're going to have to trust me when I tell you it's not very similar to the other 14 hours of the week that we spend together. It's occasionally serious, but not that often. It's always a little bit silly in places, very funny, hopefully, and genuinely enlightening. Well, when I say that, I mean that you will know more by 1 o'clock today than you do now, but it will not necessarily be knowledge for which you're grateful or for which you have any use whatsoever in your life ongoing. You may also have forgotten it by 1:15, but the promise has never been challenged yet. The promise holds true, as too does the pledge that I'll make you laugh out loud. Well, I won't. The radio will make you laugh out loud at least once between now and 1 p.m. If you are lucky, gifted, blessed enough to make my favourite contribution of the day, you will receive a Mystery Hour board game. That is a proper, grown-up radio promotional competition. And you can find the full terms and conditions for that competition at lbc.co.uk. You can also buy it. I mean, it is available. There's a travel edition, I think, due to come out later this year. But for now, it's the original and the best Mystery Hour board game, which you can find out more about at mysteryhour.co.uk. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. And the phone number is always the same, whether you've got a question or whether you've got an answer. I don't think I've made this point enough in recent weeks, is that you have to ring in with the answer as well. So if you hear someone ask a question, you think, bloody heck, I know this. And then what you hear next is usually me making a complete pig's ear of trying to answer it from a position of zero knowledge, which you might find simultaneously frustrating and amusing. But the point being that at the end of it, you'll go, oh, I'm going to ring in this. I never thought I'd ring a radio show before. This is often the way in which people who never think of themselves as people who might ring radio shows end up ringing radio shows. I quite like the caller earlier today who sounded very surprised to find himself on the radio. He even said so. I'm normally just listening. It's like, how have I ended up here? It's like it's been sort of some Star Trek style transponder. There I was, minding my own business, listening to the radio. Next thing I know, I'm on the radio with James. But Mystery Hour, of course, speaks to knowledge that you will, I hope, be proud of. Facts that you can answer questions that other people may not be able to answer. And the number remains the same. So you ring in with a question and then you ring in with an answer. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I'm going to give a little shout out to an 8-year-old in Plymouth whose name I haven't been given, but I know that your mum is called Sarah, and I know that you're currently building some Star Wars Lego in your bedroom, and your mum's just popped in and noticed that you were listening to LBC. That has made my day, Sarah and Sarah's son. I asked why, and he said he wanted to listen to James O'Brien to learn stuff, and because Mum and Dad enjoy the show. I said he's got to keep it on for the next hour, as he'll really love Mystery Hour. And there it is. Look at that. Well, that's the best parenting I've seen. That's the best parenting I've come across in a very long time. And it's a transporter, not a transponder, writes Patrick in Edinburgh, who cleverly prefaces his comment, I love you, James, but it's a transporter, not a transponder. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Should we crack on? Lewis is in Loughton. Lewis, question or answer?
Of course, Transporter is a very good film series, isn't it?
Go on.
I was just wondering, given that Amazon are now going to be able to commercialise space flights, every time you see a rocket, like whether it's NASA or Amazon, you get the space shuttle, and then you've got obviously the 2 or 3 fuel boosters.
Yeah.
And I wondered, where do these all end up? Because when the Amazon pod landed back to Earth the other day, it was just the pod where the astronauts were. There was no sort of booster or anything. So where's all that gone? Is it just floating around in space?
I don't think it's floating around in space. I think it's floating around down here. Isn't it? Keith's shaking his head.
But I'm sure you see like the space shuttle, like NASA space shuttle, the one that we all sort of recognise.
Yeah, no, I know. Everyone knows what you're talking about. The big fuel tank stuck to the side of it. It goes into the air.
They come down.
They detach during takeoff. I've seen that. You've seen that.
So what, in that case, what is space junk?
That's things that have fallen off satellites and satellites that are no longer in commission. And I don't know, maybe it's the toilet from the space station. But you're only allowed one question. What is it?
That was my question. Where do all the boosters go? I think you've answered it.
I think I've answered it. They sort of land in the sea.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of them now self-land. Some of them are actually like drones, and they sort of steer themselves back to land safely. But certainly they used to just drop off. Theoretically, it could land on your head.
Yes.
If you were, if you're particularly unlucky. But that does answer your question.
Yes, it does.
Well, I'll take a round of applause then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
And one for Keith as well, because it was him that whispered in my ear the point that Rob is now making, that they can now land back in place. That's what Elon Musk's rockets do. So Keith as well gets a little round of applause.
Thank you, Keith.
No, thank you, everyone. Before you go, Lewis,
have
you got a minute?
Yes.
Do you think there was a phone in that trip you just referred to, the Jeff Bezos, all the women who went to space?
I do Perry. Actually, because there's been a lot of reaction to it on social media.
I know, which is what made me think that, because it was an absolute load of old toot, wasn't it? Really, the whole thing. But I couldn't spot what the topic would be.
Something to do with celebrities flying around.
You see, this is why they pay me the big. This is why they pay me the big bucks. Something to do with celebrities flying around the place.
Something along those lines.
That wouldn't be a phone-in, would it? Not in a million years.
Or is it morally right to commercialise space flight when we've still got, in the UK, for instance, massive homeless issues?
Bloody hell! You went from 0 to 60 in about 4 seconds flat, didn't you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the world at the moment's in a very strange place, and
that was beautifully done.
I just feel that there's much bigger issues to attend to before.
Well, you like to think that if you were one of the richest men in the world, you would be prioritising some things above sending your girlfriend into space with Katy Perry. But maybe that's why we're not the richest men in the world, Lewis. Lovely stuff. And you can see a lot of the things on YouTube that you're referring to. Where do the rocket boosters go? 10 minutes after 12 is the time. Remember, if you're struggling to get through, as soon as I bid farewell to Lewis, it frees up a phone line for you. 0345 6060973. Paul's in Romford. Paul, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Paul.
Yeah, I watch a lot of these Scandi dramas on television, and I've noticed that no matter which Scandinavian country the series may be set in, all the front doors to houses and flats all open outwards, whereas most premises, doors open inwards. I was just wondering why Scandinavian doors do that.
Have you noticed this because you are on high alert in the context of watching, because your brain is trying to solve the crime, you're taking in information like the way the doors open in a way that you wouldn't if you were watching something else?
Potentially, but
that's what I think.
I don't know if you've come across a front door in this country that opens outwards.
A few, Paul.
No,
yeah.
I never have. No,
you mean one that opens outwards as opposed to inwards? I mean, I guess traditionally it's because there's people walking past. So maybe, do you see what I mean? So you can't have your front door opening outwards on an old terrace because it was opening outwards onto the street, and you might have whacked someone around everywhere. You might have smacked someone. Whereas maybe in Scandinavia, everyone has a front garden. That's my first answer.
Right, it's a theory. I'm not sure I would concur with it.
Harder to kick it in if it opens outwards.
But I mean, theoretically, you could have in Scandinavia, you could have doors that open inwards and outwards. But all the ones that I've seen on these programs, all the doors. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Yeah.
Let me think. Let's think it through together. Snow. I just shouted snow.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to think of things that are more common in Scandinavia than here, and snow is one of them. So you wouldn't, if it opened inwards, you'd be bringing the snow in. If it opens outwards, you're pushing the snow away.
Let's expand upon that. We've got a drift. We've had a snowstorm. There's been a big drift.
Yeah.
The snow has blown up against your door.
Oh, he's got me.
If you open it inwards,
you can get out.
If you open it outwards, you couldn't because you'd be snowed in.
You'd be literally snowed in, which is probably where the phrase comes from. But you can't get snowed in with an inward-out opening door. Well, not as easily. You'd need to have about 10 foot of snow. All right, you're on. Right. You're on. I like it. Well played. What one are you watching? What are you watching at the moment? Any recommendations for the weekend?
Yeah. I just watched one. Just finished it on Flicknet. The glass dome.
The glass
quite a good one.
dome. All right, thank you for that. I shall check it out. 30 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you all. Al's in Southport. Al, question or answer?
It is a question for you, James.
Carry on.
It is about milk floats. Sorry, it's a bit of a boring topic.
Don't do that. Make it interesting. I mean, just to clarify, who did you speak to? Are we confident this isn't a motoring question?
It's 100% not a motoring question.
Right,
I know you don't like motoring questions.
Carry on,
not a motoring question.
Good.
We have our milk delivered by milk floats. They're from the 1960s and 70s.
Oh, right.
But
still,
they don't abide by the cold chain rules. So it is not refrigerated. And I worked in retail for a number of years, and of course it's all going to be chilled. You've got this 30-minute rule, but our milk float drops at 4 a.m. So it's outside for 3 or 4 hours, even on the milk float. So how do they not have to refrigerate the milk floats for the milk to be delivered?
Well, and you haven't asked him? Her?
I haven't asked him, no, because it's 4 a.m, and I think he might find that a bit peculiar.
Yeah, but it's bothered you because you know that you need a continuous, unbroken sequence of temperature-cold environments necessary for maintaining the quality of temperature-sensitive products.
Yeah.
And we think, what else does he do? Does he do, like, eggs?
I think they do. They do milk and orange juice and eggs and bread.
Do you get it delivered? Do you get a delivery every morning?
We used to, but unfortunately, because it's now not sought after, we're now 3 days a week because
you've cut down on your milk. Yeah, you've cut down on your milk use.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember when the milkman started stocking banana milk when I was a kid.
Nice.
That was one of the best days of my life. Because Mum said we could have, because my sister liked chocolate milk and I liked banana milk, so we used to alternate. 1 week you get banana, the next week you get chocolate. It was magic, absolutely magic. But it was not obeying the cold chain rule. They didn't have to back then. So how do milk floats get? Are you sure it's not refrigerated in any way?
100%.
Yeah,
I'm certain of that. And these things are, archaic. It's from the 90s. Ours is deregistered. So what's that? 1966.
Wow.
And it looks absolutely knackered. So
well, it probably is, aren't we all, mate? Born in that era, honestly. There you go. I love it. Why? Why does a milk float get a free pass on the cold chain rule? This is from Justin. James, I love you, but me and all my neighbours' doors open outwards. Well, you don't tell me where you are. You might be in Copenhagen, in which case you've proved nothing. It's 12:16.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 12. Why do the doors in Scandinavia open outwards when most doors over here open inwards? How does a milk float get to swerve the cold chain rule? And whatever questions you want to add to the list. 03456060973. Don't tell me. Oh, it's the same person. So it's all right, I forgive you. Telling me where it is at all the doors. So not every door opens inwards or outwards in different locales, but generally speaking, Paul has observed, and remember, he's watching Scandinavian crime dramas, so his senses are on high alert. He's really, really paying attention to things. In Scandinavia, it would seem the doors are much more likely to open outwards, and here they're much more likely to open inwards, and we're wondering why that is. James is in. Oh, actually, speaking of James's, the 8-year-old lad in Plymouth, whose mum Sarah told me that he was listening to the show while doing his Star Wars Lego. Well, I wonder what you're doing. Are you doing the Millennium Falcon? That's big. He is also called James. So that's 3 Jameses, all in a row on the big show. This one's in Bicester. Question or answer, James?
I have a question for my 8-year-old.
Fantastic. Go on.
So his question is, do dogs have twins, identical twins?
I presume all mammals do, don't you?
Yeah, I wonder this, but I thought it might be a bit more...
We've got to go definitive, mate. We've got to go definitive, so you and I aren't going to be able to work it out between us, but I like that. What's your little boy's name?
Alfie.
Nice one. And does Alfie have a particular reason for wanting to know this, or did it just pop up in curiosity hour?
Yeah, it was one of the random questions that I'm asked just before bedtime, when their brain's kind of asking all the questions in the world.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it? It's just all about extending bedtime. I'm not sure it's got much to do. He probably doesn't care whether or not dogs can have twins. He just thought, Dad's such a mug, I'll ask him that. I'll get another 5 minutes awake. Get another 5 minutes before he turns the lights off. Let me do my best to get an answer for Alfie. Can dogs have identical twins is I think, the point of the question. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you, James. Thank you, Alfie. Hello, Bo in Milton Keynes. Question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Bo.
It's to go back to your question about what happens to bits of space vehicles when they're launched.
Yes. I thought I nailed that. I thought me and Keith knocked that out of the park, didn't we, between us?
You didn't get it quite right.
Oh, go on then. Honestly, everyone's a critic.
I try not to be. No, it's a bit of both. As you rightly said, people like SpaceX, some of their boosters do come back and make a landing either on land or on floating platforms. And that is something that Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, they're trying to do with a very large booster called New Glenn.
Okay. What happened to Old Glenn?
Sorry?
What happened to Old Glenn?
Old Glenn was one of the early astronauts.
Oh, of course, yes. Glenn Beck.
John Glenn.
John Glenn. Who's Glenn Beck? Why am I talking? He's a flipping Fox News presenter. John Glenn. Godspeed, John Glenn. What does that come from?
That comes from when he was actually being launched on the first orbital mission.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
By the Americans.
That's a great...
Hasten to add.
I've got that burnt in my memory for some reason. Godspeed, John Glenn. Anyway, carry on. And is that honestly named after John Glenn, Old Glenn?
It is actually named after him, yeah.
Well, you live and learn.
And the Shepard, which is the little one that Katy Perry went up.
Yes.
And they're not the first to go up in it, by the way.
No.
William Shatner, to get your Star Trek connection into it, has also flown on it.
Was he a bit unimpressed?
No, he was actually very moved by it.
Oh, that was it. Sorry. I'm misremembering everything.
It did actually profoundly change some of his worldviews.
That was it.
Yeah.
That's
the new Shepard, named after Alan Shepard, the very first American to fly in space, although he didn't orbit. He just went straight up, straight down.
Well, I never.
Yeah.
So what have you added to the sum total of human knowledge here? That it was sort of right, but even the Amazon ones are... They're
moving towards reusability. The early ones were disposable. NASA still are on the disposable.
The NASA still do this much?
They have currently the world's most powerful operational rocket.
Do they?
Which is called the yeah.
And how often does it fly?
It's called the SLS. It's only so far flown once.
Oh, really? Oh, God, that is quite funny. I wondered why you were laughing. That's obviously an in-joke among space enthusiasts. But,
it's the big rocket to take crews to the moon in the Artemis program to return humans to the moon.
Wow. Which brings us back to the first hour. Hasn't Donald Trump tinkered with that a bit?
They're trying to. There's a certain person called Elon Musk who I'd rather not talk about.
Well, don't then.
Who's trying to interfere with things because he's got a big new rocket which doesn't work.
Did you know that Katy Perry wasn't the first pop star in space?
Actually, I didn't.
It was Lady Gagarin.
Oh dear.
That's from...
you should be on the radio.
That's from Daz. Well played, Daz. If that was your own, you get double points. If it wasn't, it still doesn't. But I get it. Now, what are your qualifications?
I've been involved in space advocacy for many, many years.
That's fantastic.
And also do a lot of research into it. I've written about it extensively. Currently writing about the Artemis program as well.
Oh, exciting. Is it your career or is it semi-career? Is it like sideline career, side hustle?
It was a semi-career for about 20 years alongside of doing other things.
Yes, that's what I thought. And can I ask you a personal question?
Certainly.
What's Bo short for?
I have no idea. My proper name is actually, given secret away, is Barry, but I've been known as Bo, B-O. I'm assuming that's no reference to my personal hygiene.
B-O. It takes us back to a certain English tennis player, if people have really been watching the news this week. So you just started getting called Bo
I started getting called Bo when I was about 12 years old at school, and it's a name that stuck.
And it stuck. Well, I never, so it's not short for anything, which is...
It's not short for anything, no.
You got yourself a round of applause, Bo.
Okay.
You don't meet many Bows, not outside Hazard County. Will's in Camberwell. Will, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
We're living in the cost of living crisis and all that, and I personally am a bit skint at the minute.
Yeah.
I was wandering into Camberwell the other day, and I saw a lady enthusiastically feeding pigeons on the green.
Yes.
And you'd had a question about pigeons versus doves, I think, a while ago. And I was looking at these pigeons, and they were a bit gross, to be honest. But then I noticed they were quite fat, and I thought, if push came to shove, I could cook one of them.
Yeah.
And I just thought, why don't we eat pigeons anymore? Because we used to, didn't we, I think?
Well, certainly doves. If you, like monasteries and things, always had dovecotes, and big houses had dovecotes, and they were kept for food. It was like a permanent food supply if you kept doves, and I presume pigeons. Pigeon pie rings a bell. I'm sure we've had pigeon pie. Haven't we heard of pigeon pie? I think urban pigeons are probably filthy, mate.
Yeah, but what? They're just eating... Yeah, they do eat everything, don't they? I found one on my balcony yesterday, trapped behind a sofa that my flatmate just put in.
Well, that's dinner taken care of.
Well, it could have been. But this lady was feeding them with these little bits of corn that she'd purchased.
Good, because the bread's not good for birds generally, and including aquatic birds. I have an anecdote that is almost perfect for this story, for this question.
Brilliant.
Do you want to hear it?
Definitely.
Okay. Keith, tell me, do you know this one? Because I've got so few anecdotes and I recycle them so ceaselessly and shamelessly that Keith's probably heard them all 30 times. I don't think... Have you got any bells ringing at all at the moment? So when I was at college, a lovely bloke, whose name was Max, wanted to be a filmmaker. And he asked me if I'd be in his film. And I obviously said yes. And the plot of the film, the full details of it will elude me at the moment, but it involved me being filmed in like a big black coat, crawling around the statues on Trafalgar Square, acting as if I were catching pigeons, right?
Right.
And then the next shot was me in Covent Garden, outside the underground station in Covent Garden, with a barbecue and cooking pigeons, except they weren't actually pigeons. They were chicken joints that we'd bought from Iceland and a pillow that we got from his hall of residence, and we cut it open and we used the feathers to make it look like I just plucked the chickens, and then a lot of tomato ketchup to make it look like blood. Goodness knows what the plot was, but those are the two key themes that I remember. So I'm outside Covent Garden Station cooking what appeared to be pigeon joints with a little sign up saying pigeon burgers. There's a sign there saying pigeon burgers, £1. It shows you how long ago it was. Going back well over 20 years. And I got accosted by 3 different people.
Wow.
I got accosted by the police, who wanted to know what we were doing. And when we said we were filming, they were okay with it, but said hurry up and move along because they thought we didn't have a license. I then got accosted by another street trader who felt that I was muscling in on her turf. And again, we managed to calm her down by saying that we weren't actually taking any money. And then, and this is the bit that I found most shocking, remember, £1 a pop pigeon burgers. I then got accosted by a tourist who said, "Can I have 3, please?"
Well, there you go. I wonder how many YouTubers are at home writing this down now saying, I'm going to do that myself.
Could go, couldn't it? I wonder how many people are searching YouTube to see whether the footage actually exists anywhere, which I think is probably unlikely because it was an old-fashioned... so why don't we eat pigeons anymore?
That's it.
03456060973. And if anyone can find that film, I'll give them the money myself. Martin is in Oslo, which perhaps provides a hint as to which question he's here to answer. Question or answer, Martin?
It's an answer, James.
Go on, then.
Why the doors open outwards is because of fire regulations. Most of our buildings are constructed in timber.
Yes.
If the premises was to catch on fire, it's easier to leave a building with the door opening out than it is with the door opening inwards.
So why do we do them inwards then?
I got no idea, James.
Oh, I see. So, this is the correct... No, you've answered Paul's question. Well, it was in 2 parts. Why do they open outwards in Scandinavia rather than here? So, of course, if there's a fire, it's much easier to get out of an outward opening door than it is...
Exactly.
All our public buildings here open outwards, don't they?
There you go. It's probably the same rule.
Yeah. Oh, qualifications?
I've lived in Norway since 1985 and 25 years in construction.
Oh, well, I think I see. So it is both, because I was about to do a joke that wouldn't have been very funny. I was about to say I've lived in the UK for 53 years and I haven't got a clue about what the rules are regarding doors opening. But the combination of having lived in Oslo, Norway for 25 years and working in construction provides you with the qualifications you needed to get this.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you,
Martin. 12:29 is the time. So we've done the doors. We've done the boosters with Beau. Of course, Beau doesn't have to be short for anything, as a friend of mine has just reminded me. It can be like Beau Geste or Beau Brummel, Beau, French word for beauty. Milk floats. How come they don't have to obey the cold chain rule? Can you get identical twin dogs? And why don't we eat pigeons anymore on anything like the scale that we could? You could solve a hunger crisis in a minute with urban pigeons, not wood pigeons. 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:32 is the time. I won't interrupt Mistria unduly, but yet more evidence of the United States rapid descent into full fascism and my own failure to keep up with everything. Sebastian Gorka, who is apparently Trump's counter-terrorism czar, but was touting himself around studios in this country, where some feeble-minded presenters were happy to indulge him, has said that any Americans criticising the deportation of entirely innocent people are providing material support to terrorists, which is a felony crime, and could see them face terror charges. So that notion of either, you either 100% support the regime, whatever it does, or you're a traitor, another key hallmark of fascism. Anyway, back to the fun stuff. 12:33 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien's Mystery Hour on LBC. Milk floats, twin dogs and pigeons. Still in need of answers, but 2 phone lines free currently for your question, or indeed your answer. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. David's on the Wirral. David, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
Is how much a person sweats hereditary?
I mean, there's going to be all sorts of factors.
Yeah.
Isn't there? Because it's going to have a lot to do with how hydrated you are, I'd have thought, and what you're drinking and what you're eating and how your thyroid gland is operating. But hereditariness could be part of it. Why do you ask?
So I do a lot of combat sports, and
you and me both, David. You and me both.
And I find that I sweat a lot more than a lot of other people in the classes.
Are they fitter than you, perhaps?
I don't think so.
No, I just wondered, because I caught myself sweating quite a lot at my tennis lesson the other day, but that's probably because I've been out of action for a few months.
Well, I wouldn't think so. I mean, I've done it consistently. So, but another reason is I think that is because my dad, he was a runner, and when he ran, he said he always sweat a lot more than everyone else.
Okay.
And my brother also, when he done sports, he also sweat a lot more than anyone else.
Do you drink a lot of white wine?
I don't tend to.
No. I like this question. I mean, I don't know how anyone would know whether it was hereditary or not. I mean, because there'll be people listening who know what the factors are that determine the amount of sweat. But is it an inherited trait? Is sweating a lot hereditary? I love that question. What sort of combat sports do you do?
I do kickboxing and Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, tick. Thank you, David. He didn't even pretend not to laugh at me when I suggested that I also engage in combat sports. 0345 6060 973 is the question. Is the number you need if you can tell us whether or not sweating is hereditary. John's in Masham. John, question or answer?
That's an answer, please, James.
Carry on.
First, can I just say you kept me sane during lockdown?
Well, I get this a lot,
but
how do we know? Thank you, and I'm only joshing.
I started listening to you because it was just me and a 2-year-old all day in, day out.
Gosh.
You were the adult in the room, so thank you.
Except for the fact that I've only got your word for it that you actually did stay sane. You might have gone completely crackers as a consequence of listening to this programme.
Well, 20 years in catering will probably do that anyway. So.
Which perhaps gives us a clue as to which question it is that you're going to answer.
Yes, pigeons.
Go on.
Well, we do eat pigeons. Pigeons are still going. I mean, they're killed year round. Generally, I tend to use them more in autumn when the game season's on. But game generally is eaten less than other meat because the processing on it, especially birds, is a bit of a faff.
So these would be shot pigeons?
Yes.
So someone goes out and shoots them and then you buy them and cook them up in your restaurant?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think he was asking about urban pigeons.
What specifically? Well, I mean, you wouldn't want just for the pollution and the fact that you don't know what they're
that's
eating.
what I said. They're just filthy. They're just filthy. You wouldn't eat. You wouldn't like a Trafalgar Square pigeon. Goodness knows what it's going to have knocking around in its guts and its nervous system.
Whereas what we get are like nice, fat, juicy wood pigeons that generally are either fed off, the local woods that they live in, or they get specific feed to help fatten them up.
That's your wood pigeon. That is qualifications.
I'm a chef. I've got a restaurant, and I mean, we had pigeon on last year.
There you go. Do you want to tell me what your restaurant's called? You don't have to, but people might want to check it out.
I would love to.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, we're called Where There's Smoke. We are based in the beautiful town of Massam in North Yorkshire, and we do a weekly changing set menu that we cook everything over fire.
I was going to say that sounds like it's a cooking over fireplace. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's cool.
What are the specials tonight?
We've got some grilled king scallops, which are going to go with like a wild garlic butter, and some of last year's fermented wild garlic, which is turned into kimchi.
Oh wow! I'd sound a bit like the Paul Whitehouse character on the Suits You Sir. Then when you just go, ooh, wild garlic. And do you buy your wild garlic or do you forage?
No, I went out foraging last few weeks with my son. Great.
What's the secret?
Oh, just give it a week or two. When it first emerges, give it a week or two for them to actually like really grow up, and like there's no point getting the very first stems just because there's more effort than yield.
And do you know where to go, or do you smell it and then seek it?
Well, we've lived here for a few years, and we've kind of
got your little spots.
Just found spots.
Keep it under your hat, mate. Keep it under your hat. What else do you forage?
I mean, they're everywhere.
What else do you forage?
Well, when it comes in, you get lots of little microherbs and things that will grow out, like sorrels, and you can get little wild pine cones. What else do we get? Yeah.
Oh, this sounds lovely. I don't know when I'm next going to be in your neck of the woods. Where is Massam exactly?
Do you know Ripon?
Yeah, I do.
It's about 20 minutes north of Ripon. It's you must know Theakston's and Black Sheep.
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, know it well. I went to school. I went to Ampleforth. I went to school near Helmsley. I know my way around that. Do you know the Durham Ox in Craik?
Not yet. I don't get out much. I'm normally in the restaurant.
Well, of course you are. I can recommend that place. Thank you, John. Round of applause for John. Sorry, I forgot that we were on the radio then.
No, thank you.
I thought we were just having a bit of a chat. That was lovely. Great answer. And you wouldn't eat a mission. Is it? You wouldn't eat a flipping pigeon, would you? Out of Trafalgar Square, because it's just rancid. And nothing against pigeons, personally. Well, actually, that's not true. I think they're pretty gross. But I'd eat a nice wood pigeon, especially one cooked over charcoal. John, are you still there?
Still here, yeah.
Do you, in the restaurant, do you advertise what charcoal you're using?
We use, there's a company just up the road called the Yorkshire Charcoal Company. We use their stuff.
I love it. Because there's a place, you would never eat a Leicester Square pigeon, would you? Or a Trafalgar Square pigeon?
I mean, it's not top of my list, no.
No, I know, I'm with you. Sorry, I think you've probably got more important things to do than indulge my fascination with foraging. Less so with pigeons, but I love that. There's a restaurant I love. I've forgotten the name of it. It's in Soho, and they advertise that they put on the blackboard what charcoal they're using, because they're so into their barbecuing that it can have a slight influence on what the food actually tastes like. But they're using the same charcoal all the time, so it wouldn't matter. Loads of breweries in Massam, well worth a visit, but I can't remember. I don't know when the last time I was there. 12:41 is the time. Where there's smoke in Massam. Who else has got a bit of mouth-watering going? Have you got a bit of mouth-watering going on? I'm hungry now. Clark's in Scarborough, also in Yorkshire. Question or answer, Clark?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
So, when cats purr,
yes,
is it a voluntary response? Or
doobie-doobie-doo. No, sorry. You can tell I'm breaking up in 20 minutes, can't you, for a nice long weekend. When cats purr, carry on.
So when cats purr, is it a voluntary response or is it an involuntary response?
Oh, I like that.
The reason I want to know is because so my black cat Finley is the most loving, most adorable, cuddly cat you could possibly imagine.
Yes.
And when he purrs, when he's sitting on my knee, it's like, oh, this is nice.
Yes.
It's a sign that he's happy.
Yes.
But actually, is he just manipulating me by choosing to do something that he knows is going to get a positive response from me?
Wow. I mean, and of course, it still purrs when you're asleep. They don't purr permanently. They come in, they settle on. I woke up with a cat on my chest this morning. Don't worry, it was my own. Oh, which means I should say thank you. Someone sent me 3 cat toys. I'll say thank you on Tuesday when I come back to work, because I haven't got your name with me. Thank you for that. The purring as a kind of reflex, as it were, reaction to feeling comfortable or feeling happy. They just start purring. They have no control over it. Or do they say, do you know what I'm going to do now, Clark? I'm going to have a nice purr.
Exactly.
I love that question. I don't know who would know the answer to it, but someone must. Do pigeons? Do cats purr reflexively or consciously or unconsciously? 0344. There we go. And I've got some phone lines free, and I've got questions that need answers. Do you get twin dogs, identical twin dogs? Is sweating a lot a hereditary feature? 0345 6060 973. Why don't electric milk floats have to obey the cold chain rule? 0345 6060 973. And I've got room for a few more questions. It's only 12:43. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Ian is in Farnham. Ian, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Ian.
It's about woodpeckers.
Oh, yes. Greater spotted, lesser spotted?
Any of them.
All of them.
I know you're a bit of a birdologist, so you may...
I'm not. I'm rubbish. I'm very much an amateur. But I did go on a bird walk in Duke's Meadows the other day. And do you know something?
Okay.
Do you want to know something interesting about ornithologists?
Yes, please.
About the proper ones, not ones like me who are hoping to see something exotic. The proper ornithologists, when they're doing a survey, they get almost as excited about a common or garden magpie as they do about anything else, because they're just trying to count as many as they can in the course of a single hour, you see. So I'm going, it's only a bloody magpie. Everybody calm down. I want to see a kestrel. I'm here for a kestrel. I want to see a heron.
Birds.
They are clever birds, but who gets excited about seeing a magpie? Answer, proper ornithologists. Anyway, where were we?
Yeah, okay. So, woodpeckers. So I was out in the woods and I was listening to these woodpeckers and, they were drilling into these trees. So my question is, and I have a few thoughts on it, is why don't they get headaches or
maybe they do. Maybe that's why they only do it in short bursts.
Yeah, and I thought, my thoughts were maybe it's a consequence of predation, so they just have to put up with it. I thought...
Because you're thinking in quite an anthropomorphic way here, if you don't mind me saying so. You're imagining what would happen if you were banging your head against the tree on a regular basis.
I am, yeah, but I did have some other thoughts. So maybe the brain's surrounded by some sort of jelly to take the shock, or maybe the brain's so small that there's no impact. But my favourite one was maybe the beak, or something between the beak and the skull has some kind of sort of pneumatical appendage that takes shock out of it.
Listen, I'm enjoying your contribution, but this isn't really how Mystery Hour works. You don't get to ask a question and then offer up 4 different... It's not multiple choice, Ian. You don't get to offer up 4 different answers to it yourself.
I know you like a bit of banter, so I thought we'd just...
Fair enough. You've got me there. Why do woodpeckers resist head impact injury, is the question you're asking, if we're going to get academical about it. I do not know. And everyone can stop making the Prince Andrew joke about David's question regarding sweating being hereditary, please, because I've now seen it 300 times. Ian, thank you. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:48 is the time. Why don't woodpeckers hurt themselves? Why do cats purr? It's very natural history today. Look at my list. Woodpeckers, cats and pigeons and dogs. That's extraordinary. And we haven't got an answer to the dogs question, and that's for Alfie, and he's only 8, so can we hurry up, please? Do dogs have twins? Can you get identical twin puppies? 0345 6060 973. Is David a sweaty so-and-so for hereditary reasons? Or will it be based upon other variables? 0345 6060 973. Do cats purr consciously or unconsciously? Reflexively or reactively? 0345 6060 973. And why don't woodpeckers hurt themselves? Richard is in, have a crack at this, West Orton.
Spot on, James.
Well, I nearly said Houghton, because in Norfolk you'd be a Houghton, but in Manchester you're a Horton, so it's West Orton. There it is.
That's it. Yes. No, spot on there.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Question or answer, Richard?
It's a question, James. Well, firstly, could I just say thank you for being a fantastic beacon of sensibility over the years.
What a lovely day this is turning out to be. Thank you too. I really appreciate that.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. So it's a question. Basically, if it's a sunny day and there are showers, basically the shower clouds that come along usually appear really black. But when the actual shower or the clouds actually come overhead and you have the shower, the clouds are much less black. They're grey. So basically, I mean, I'm obviously assuming it's something to do with the light conditions. But basically, my question is, how come the clouds appear black when the sun's out, and then when they're actually over you, it's much less. They're much less black. They're just grey.
When are they black?
Well, if as I say, if it's a showery day,
but are you just looking up? Are you just looking up, or are you looking at the horizon? So the sun's out and it's raining.
The sun's out. It's sunny. The clouds are some distance away, but when you see them approaching, they look really black. But then when they're actually upon you and it's raining, basically
they look light. Oh, so you might expect it to be the other way around. You'd expect things perhaps to get darker as they got closer rather than to get lighter. Crikey, that's a tricky one. Okay, you're on.
There you go.
No, thank you, Richard. I'll try and get you an answer on that. Why do clouds get lighter as they come closer? So they're less black when they're actually raining on you. I'll tell you what, we've never had on Mystery. Why does it always rain on me? Is it because I lied when I was 17? No? Good Lord, talk about a stony face reaction. Just from Michelle, gutted you've got a long weekend, James. I have been able to listen uninterrupted to you this week whilst on holiday in Cyprus. Any chance of you cancelling your break? Yeah, all right. I won't bother then, Michelle, seeing as it's you. Seeing as you are so nice, don't be ridiculous. You can listen to old shows on Global Player, and there's Full Disclosure podcasts as well. You can. There's all sorts. And, of course, Matt Fry is here tomorrow, so why wouldn't you want to listen to him? Matt Fry will be going, you think I go in hard on Donald Trump. Matt Fry will be taking absolutely no prisoners, I confidently predict. 12:51 is the time. So why do clouds change colour, really, as they move closer? Why don't woodpeckers hurt themselves? Sweat, twin dogs and milk floats. Derek is in Larkfield in Kent. Derek, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer.
Carry on, Derek.
About the milk and the keeping a cold temperature.
About the milk.
Yeah, sorry.
That's right.
In the throat.
No, I like it. I thought we were doing a sort of carry-on type conversation. About the milk floats, matron. Go on.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get that. I'm out of practice with the older impressions, but never mind. Yeah.
Milk floats.
Yeah. I was a milkman around 50 years ago, and the milk getting too hot wasn't an issue then.
Right.
Where they kept it in the chillers overnight, it was pretty cold. And even in high summer, by the time it would have affected it, you were finished, except for one day, which was usually a Friday, the money collection day. And it did get a bit warm, but there was no problem at all.
So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily explain why they get a free pass on the cold chain rule now, because there'd be lots of other things you could do that with. You could get them nice and cold and then transport them unrefrigerated until they got to the next refrigerator and they'd be all right.
Yeah, exactly.
But I imagine it's because, when the rule came in, there was still quite a few milk floats buzzing around, and it would have made their life impossible if they had to obey the cold chain rule. And they hadn't had any problems in the past, so why would they suddenly have to accommodate new rules?
That's true, yeah. All the traditional milk floats went a long time ago. And
you say that. Al's mate's got one. He reckoned it was about a 1969 vintage, so that's going to be quite quite original. So it'd be quite niche, be quite nice to see one. Why did you knock it on the head? Did you not enjoy it, or was the market? I mean, 50 years ago, people were still getting their milk delivered a lot.
Yeah, well, my dad was a milkman. I used to go with him from about the age of 7, which is 1960. He had prior to that, he had a horse and cart. And the horse knew exactly where to go, where to stop, where to cross to the other side of the road. Did it all by itself.
That's fantastic.
It was amazing.
Did the horse live at home?
No.
No, don't laugh at me. He might have done. He might keep the horse at home and then ride it to wouldn't fit through the door.
Well, we lived in a top 4 flat. This is London. So that would have been a bit difficult.
Of course, you lived in a top floor flat. How else would that have gone for me if I had to ask someone if they can? Because I'm fascinated by the old terraces, like the Victorian terraces, when every 3 or 4 houses there's an archway. And that would often be because people were keeping a horse in the back of for their business. Yeah. I like that. I like that. Derek, have a round of applause on me. Lovely stuff.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Cheers, James.
Cheers, Derek. Have a great weekend. And of course, I fully appreciate not everyone's off tomorrow, so I'm being a little bit previous. Simon's in High Wycombe. Simon, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on, Simon.
Yes, that's about the woodpecker. I share your absolute fascination with birds. And so woodpecker is a great solution. What they do, the caller's right in there is some sort of shock absorber, but basically it's actually their tongue.
Wow.
So their tongue is attached to the base of their nostrils, base of their beak, and then actually goes up and around their brain and then comes up from underneath their brain out of their mouth.
All the time?
Yeah, with the vast majority of species it does, yeah. And I think if I'm right, the majority of species it attaches to the left nostril.
Well, you're good.
As well.
Wowee.
Yeah. That also serves a dual purpose as well, in that it allows their tongue to be longer because they can basically store it up in their head. And so it allows the tongue to be longer so they can get into the hole to get insects out of the holes they've made.
Oh, this is fascinating. Qualifications?
I used to be a wildlife guide in South Africa, and then I'm also training to be a bird ringer as well.
That's fantastic. How much training do you have to do to be a bird ringer?
Quite a lot, and then it depends how often you go, but it's usually a couple of years of
Is that under the auspices
of birds.
of the RSPB, or are you a freelance?
No, so the licensing is done by the British Trust for Ornithology. They're the ones that do the licensing.
Oh, crikey. Yeah. I'm a very, very amateur enthusiast compared to you. Simon, have a round of applause. Oh, lovely answer.
Thank you very much.
Look at that. You've done it, James, writes Michael. It was close. Crikey, only got his laugh out loud moment for the horse on the top floor flat. I'd hope there was one, but I've had a few today before we got there. What about the Lady Gagarin? That was a classic. Tara's in Lewisham. Tara, question or answer?
Hello, James. Answer.
Hello.
Thank you. Can I just say this is absolutely my favourite hour of the week?
Me too.
Always.
Me too, actually.
Well, good.
It's either that or my Pilates lesson. Carry on.
Okay, so in relation to cat purring.
Yes.
So first of all, it is when they're comfortable, it's involuntary.
Yes.
But they can turn it. They can make it how they want to. So in the same way that they can sit on you to show something or do other certain behaviours. Because purring is when they're comfortable, it's a sort of offshoot of their breathing mechanism.
So it kicks in involuntarily, and sometimes they do decide to have a quick purr.
So if they're if you listen to cats purring, I'm not suggesting that you go out and listen to cats purring, James, but
I'll stay in and listen to cats purring.
I've listened to very many cats,
Carry
on. So they. If they're feeling hungry, they'll purr in a different way, and they'll approach you. And there's behaviour which attaches to it, of course. It's not just in itself purring. They will also, if they're hungry, if they're not feeling well, if whatever they want, most of it will come through their different ways of purring as well as their actions.
What are your qualifications?
Okay, well, I'm not going to win a prize, but that's okay because I already bought it.
Oh, well done.
It's not actually my own qualification. It's just that one of my godchildren asked, because he had a really mad cat, asked me about why it's behaving in this way. And it so happens that I have I had at the time, a friend who's an animal psychologist.
So you phoned them up and asked them?
Who explained this in quite some
detail. Right, got you a round of applause. I've got to crack on.
Behavioural therapy.
Okay. It worked. Fantastic. I'm going to give Gary the credit for this from Medway. He goes, the woodpeckers could have taken a medication for their headaches, but the parrots ate them all. Amethyst, what a lovely name, is in Ashfield. Amethyst, question or answer?
Hi, I've got an answer.
Go on then.
So it's for the cloud question.
You've got 14 seconds.
Okay, the clouds actually get lighter because the rain has been falling.
Of course it does.
So the darkness of the cloud, depends on the density and the size of the water droplets within the cloud.
Qualifications?
PhD in meteorology.
Blimey heck, that's me told, isn't it? So it's actually Dr. Amethyst.
It is, yeah.
You sound like a DJ. Have a round of applause. Thank you. I don't squeeze that one. I don't have a favourite. Let's give it to Derek with his milk floats. Yeah, I like that one with the top floor flat. That made me laugh. That's it for me for another day and indeed another week. Matt Fry will be standing in for me tomorrow here on LBC. If you missed any of this show, you can of course listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including Full Disclosure and James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of my show in 60 minutes every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.